The wind that came out of the north the night Ser Brynden Tully stood watch atop the battlements of Riverrun was no autumn breeze. It cut through wool and boiled leather alike, tasting of iron and old bones, a thin, dry current that whispered of distant ice fields and the hush of endless snow. In the moon's hard glimmer the red fork looked black steel smooth, yet thin plates of ice shivered at every eddy, fragile as a frostlace cobweb but spreading downriver with an unnerving speed. Brynden cupped his gloved hands and exhaled into them, watching the breath curl white and drift away as if eager to follow the current northward. Winter is early, he thought, but that was a lie his Riverland's heart kept telling itself. This was not winter, this was something wilder and older than any season. Somewhere beyond the wall, he sensed, an ancient hinge had swung wide and the cold now rode upon hinges of sorrow. Below, the torches guttered in their cages and soldiers muttered of late snows and the stranger's hand. A breeze ought to carry wood smoke and damp forge heat. But tonight it smelled of nothing at all. Sound died quickly in the new chill, muffled as though each noise were wrapped in velvet. Yet every step on flagstone snapped louder than flint on steel. Hushed voices carried unnaturally far. The old maester had said ravens from Castle Black had failed to come for 3 turnings of the moon, yet few in camp paid heed. They had other wars to mind. Still, Brynden Tully felt the hush in his marrow and tasted metal on his tongue, as if the night were a blade drawn bare. On the King's Road many leagues to the south, Arya Stark dreamed of white trees and wolves that howled at slate skies. She woke in the dark of a ruined inn, Ghost Hill they called it, though there were no ghosts here, only men chasing banners, and she one step ahead of them all. Gendry slept curled beside the dying embers, and Hot Pie's snores rattled dust from the cracked beams. The night inside felt colder than the night without. Pieces of hoarfrost gleamed on the thatch overhead. Arya wrapped her arms tight and remembered how the dire wolf in her dream had scented something sweet, as if summer still lingered beyond the black pines, only to find an air empty of all smells, empty like the world when it holds its breath. She rose, crept past her companions, and slipped outside. The sky was perfectly clear, yet pale flakes drifted down like ash. Each flake melted the instant it touched earth, making no sound. There was a hush, a stillness so heavy it made her ears ring. Far away, deeper than thought, she fancied she heard ice cracking, huge slabs grinding like distant thunder under the weight of some vast footfall. It set her heart to racing. She almost called for Nymeria, though the dire wolf had been lost north of the Trident, living now only in her half-remembered dreams. The flakes stopped as suddenly as they had begun. Arya stood shivering, though no wind stirred. Then she heard a horse's distant whinny, shrill and terrified, cut short at once. She fled inside and barred the door. Gendry woke cursing her noise, but Arya told him nothing. Some truths were too large to fit into words shaped by children's mouths. At King's Landing, the Hand of the King stood on the ramparts of Maegor's Holdfast and watched the dawn creep pale and feeble over Blackwater Bay. Tyrion Lannister tasted salt on his lips from the wind yet felt no comfort in it. The sea itself seemed to draw back from the capital's filth-slick beaches as if the tide wished to abandon the land. He had sent a dozen ravens the previous night, 1 to Riverrun, 2 to the Eyrie, another to Sunspear, even to Highgarden, though he doubted Mace Tyrell would heed. The words had been plain, unadorned by flourishes. The chill in the north is no common winter, the wall has gone silent. If we do not heed, kings will soon kneel to darker crowns than ours. No reply had yet come, and in truth Tyrion did not expect them. Men believed in sellswords and sieges, not stories muttered in northern wind. He stubbed gloved fingers on cold stone. Somewhere far away, ships burned, siege lines formed, and small folk prayed to every god with equal desperation. Yet the thing coiling beyond the world of ravens and courtiers felt as inevitable as iron being drawn to a lodestone. Tyrion ordered extra watchmen set along the walls. Nestor Roy scoffed, what need, when Stannis menaced from the east and Renly's shade still haunted the Reach. Tyrion only sighed. Let them scoff. A wise man makes ready against what cannot be beaten. The city smelled of tidemuck and tallow smoke, but in the cold hush before sunrise there lurked an underscent, faint as old linen mildewed after long winter storage. He rubbed the bridge of his nose, heart heavy. If the wall had indeed fallen silent, their petty thrones would soon seem bright toys abandoned in a child's frost-ruined garden. North of the neck, the marshes had begun to freeze. Mira Reed skimmed a flat stone across a mirrored pool and watched it skip once, twice, then vanish beneath a lid of thin ice that had not been there a breath before. Her brother Jojen murmured a green dream half-spoken, bridges of frost across fields of speargrass, weirwoods crying sap teardrops, and a boy with wolf's blood in his veins calling a fire that was not fire. They had felt the land turn under them, subtle as the shifting of a sleeping giant, yet world-changing all the same. Crannogmen knew the moods of wetlands, the tidings of sap and root. They felt the dread rising like black water beneath rotted planks. "We must send word," Mira said, breaking the brittle ice with her spear haft. "Southeast, everywhere." "Ravens will not reach in time," Jojen replied, eyes pale as lichen-washed stone. "When the first real frost settles, wings may freeze mid-flight. We'll need stronger messengers than birds." Mira remembered tales her father had told by rushlight of old packed paths sealed with blood, oaths to fight together when the cold gods walked again. She wondered if those Southron lords still believed. War has made them deaf, she feared. They will not hear until the dead are at their doors. A breeze sighed across the reeds, rustling dry stalks in a voice like distant parchment tearing. At Castle Black, the morning's frost glittered on the ramparts like powdered glass. Jon Snow rested both hands atop the hilt of Longclaw, staring absent-minded down at the churned mess where old snow had been scraped away to stack casks of black pitch. The courtyard rang with hurry. Men shouting, mounts whinnying, kettle drums echoing from the gate tower where Gren rallied the few who remained. 10 days earlier, Lord Commander Jeor Mormont had marched beyond the wall with 300 brothers in black to search for Benjen Stark and answer wildling fires. Ravens sent since had returned bearing only blood-stained feathers or nothing at all. 2 never returned, and now the air itself felt wrong. The cold no longer bit but numbed, as if smoothing every edge. The sky, even at midday, carried a milky glaze that turned the sun into a tarnished coin. Every night the aurora flickered like silent flame beyond the frost fangs, green and blue veils rippling across the void. Etalit joked that the sky had grown a bruise. No one laughed after the 3rd night. Jon remembered Corin Halfhand's words, "When the dead men move, you'll taste copper on your tongue." He tasted it now. Ghosts paced the curtain wall, hackles bristling. Crows perched mute upon snow-laden beams, black eyes glittering. They did not caw or shuffle, they only watched the horizon where the haunted forest met a low crawling mist. Some mornings the mist lingered atop the snow like breath held too long. Men whispered of shapes forming and dissolving inside, a gaunt horse, a horned king, a boy's face without eyes. Jon listened but said little. Words did not matter, the wall itself felt it, thrumming like a bowstring. He could almost feel giants' footsteps. No, something colder and crueler, old as night falling for the first time. Samwell Tarly had taken to the rookery, coaxing each raven as if they were children. Messages scratched out until quills snapped. Yet every new morning brought one less raven in the cages. Some said the birds had taken wing northward by instinct, others that they had been stolen away. Nobody voiced the thought that perhaps the birds had sensed what came and dared not carry warnings to men fated to die. Jon watched Lord Steward Bowen Marsh count barrels of lamp oil. Eyes met across the yard, and between them passed the knowledge that black steel and torches would not be enough. Deep in the Wolfswood, Robb Stark's scouts found a village frozen in silence. No doors smashed, no blood spilled, yet every soul gone as if plucked out like berries from a bush. Cooking pots sat atop cold ashes, a child's wooden horse lay half-painted, bristles stiff with dried red pigment. Tracks in the snow led nowhere, a single line of partial prints that meandered then simply vanished. Grey Wind prowled the huts, tail between his legs, growling a warning Robb had never heard before, neither challenge nor fear, but something ancient, a note that said the world had shifted out of true. The young wolf ordered funeral flames for houses whose owners must be presumed dead. When the pyres burned low, the ashes formed delicate crystalline patterns that looked eerily like snowflakes. The sight unsettled even Helm of Tallheart, a man who laughed at storm pikes and crossbow volleys. Afterward, no man wished to speak of the village. Yet Robb's army carried the hush with them, an unease clinging like hoarfrost to male lynx. In the starlit dark, campfires cast small warmth before guttering. Horses whickered and refused to drink from streams that had turned slushy, though the nights were still only late autumn by rights. Robb sent his dire wolf loping ahead each night. Grey Wind returned silent, muzzle slick with ice crystals, eyes reflecting bruised starlight. He would not permit even Robb to stroke his fur until dawn. Wolves were changing too. In days past, their howls had been calls, lonely, keening crescendos sweeping across the forest. Now every cry was cut short as if the singers feared to draw notice. On Dragonstone, Melisandre of Askai stood before the stone drum's tallest window, arms raised to the stars. The crimson gleam inside her eyes burned like embers under banked ash. Stannis Baratheon's war council argued behind her, a rolling melee of steel rasping across wood, parchment unfurled, Maester Pylus fluttering about with inkwells, yet she heard none of it. All her being was fixed upon a vision, a fiery sword guttering against a bleak tempest of ice far north of any sea Stannis dreamed of crossing. When Davos Seaworth at last tugged her sleeve and asked what she saw, Melisandre answered softly, an enemy older than the Storm Kings, older than Valyria's fires. The night has sent hunters. They cross the wall even now. Davos frowned, rubbing salt-scarred fingers against his beard. White Walkers. Children's tales. The dead do not heed tales, she replied, voice carrying over the quarrels of lords. They heed only the song of winter. But the song can be broken if sung louder with flame. She looked then upon Stannis, whose sallow cheeks bore hollows deeper than any shadow. Azor Ahai must ride north, not south. Stannis's knuckles whitened on the map's rim. The north is not my kingdom, not yet. But something in his eyes betrayed the flicker of a thought. A crown meaningless atop a frozen corpse. Still, when the next dispatch arrived, ravens from Eastwatch reporting blazing lights beyond the shivering sea and wildlings streaming southward. Stannis paced the chamber long into the night. Ghostly seagulls screamed around the battlements, but their cries sounded curiously muffled, as though thick ice lay between world and spirit. Far across the narrow sea, in Karthus Hall of 1,000 Thrones, Daenerys Targaryen woke from a dream of dragons fighting shadows amid falling snow. In her dream, the snowflakes were as large as saucers, and each bore inside its core a skull. The Unsullied waited below her balcony in neat phalanx rows, yet their spears trembled in dawn's chill that should not reach the sultry city. She wrapped a silken robe around her shoulders and breathed in air that felt strangely thin. The world is changing, she whispered to her children, and Drogon hissed, wings mantling as though he, too, sensed the approach of things that did not bleed and yet could kill. A ship from Pentos arrived that noon, sails furled by sailors whose lips purpled though the harbor waters steamed in heat. The captain spoke of portents, of entire fishing towns on Westeros's western coast found deserted, of birds flying south in thick black storms. He produced a scrap of black ice hard as iron, carved like an arrowhead yet cold enough to burn. When touched to water, it hissed and sent up a vapor smelling of grave soil. Dany ordered the shard cast into a brazier of coals. It did not melt but cracked, fracturing into shards that chimed like glass. Jiki muttered prayers, Missandei paled. Daenerys said only, find me a fleet twice the size of any the slavers dare muster. Westeros may soon need more than dragons. It may need every living heart. In that moment she realized how small her host seemed against death that could stride across seas frozen solid. South of the Blackwater, Brienne of Tarth rode through an orchard where blossoms clung in late bloom despite the creeping cold. She sought Sansa Stark by oath to Catelyn, yet each hamlet she passed whispered different rumors. A girl taken east by Sel's words, a maid wed to a hedge knight, a winter rose set upon an icy bier. At dusk Brienne knelt by a creek to drink but found the water rimmed with a glaze. As she touched it, frost bloomed outward across the surface, branching veins of pale blue spidering faster than her breath. She snatched her gauntlet away, unnerved. The water beneath the film looked darker than wine, and deep within she fancied she saw a white hand curl upward, beckoning. She poured the water skin anyway, steeled herself and rode on. Yet through the night's hush she heard distant clacking. Nocturnal insects? No. It was the sound of countless brittle branches, or perhaps tiny bones knocking together. She angled her horse to a trot, pulse racing. Later she would look back and see no footprints behind her. Soil had frozen too fast to bear marks. In the throne room of the Red Keep, Cersei Lannister wrapped her crimson cloak tighter, glaring at the great hearth where flames leapt fierce and bright yet failed to warm the draft-chilled air. Have the masons left cracks in these stones? She snapped at Ser Boros Blunt. The Kingsguard knight shook his head, face pallid. Icicles had formed along arrow slits high in the walls, and frost traced silver filigree across the iron of the Iron Throne itself, making each twisted blade gleam with hoary menace. Cersei shivered though she cursed herself for weakness. I want every brazier fed double, she commanded. And find who let that damned cold in. Grand Maester Pycelle shuffled forth, beard tipped with ice crystals. He spoke of unusual jet streams of a shifting climate. Cersei scoffed. Climate did not cause ravens to drop dead mid-flight over Flea Bottom, eyes wide and glassy. Climate did not send half-frozen beggars pounding on gates complaining of whites glimpsed on the Rose Road. She dismissed Pycelle with a gesture and summoned Lord Varys, but the spider only bowed low and murmured about whispers from the north that spoke of the long night returning. His eyes, usually warm, looked empty. Every song has its refrain, Your Grace, he said gently. And winter's refrain is silence. On the fist of the first men, beneath pale banners of dim aurora, the watchmen left by Mormont saw torches flicker to life far in the dark valley below. Dozens at first, then hundreds rings of cold blue flames unlike any candle or pitch brand. Men whispered prayers. Hounds refused meat. As dawn bled numb light across the snow, the shapes became clearer, a vast host moving with terrible slowness as if water flowed uphill. Figures robed in rime, horses gaunt and half-transparent, axes rimed white, eyes burning a color too bright to name. Ser Otten Withers sought to rally his men, yet the horns he ordered blown produced only thin croaks. The brass itself had grown brittle. Arrows loosed into that advancing tide snapped as they flew, frozen feathers cracking midair. Someone cried out as a bowstring turned to frost beneath his fingers. Then silence spread, deeper than before, a silence in which breath turned to brittle shard and fell to ground. One by one the torches upon the fist winked out. When the first ravens reached Winterfell, those that survived, they bore no letters. Instead, thin slivers of pale stone were bound to their legs, each shard etched with ragged scratches not meant for human eyes. Maester Luwin examined them beneath a magnifying lens and felt a tremor pass through him. The marks were not script, they were ridges, fractal as ice crystals under midday sun. He sprinkled fire sand upon one shard and it fizzed angrily, leaving a murky stain. Dragonglass? Bran asked, wheeling closer in his chair. Luwin shook his head, voice barely a whisper. Ice that remembers fire. Bran did not understand, but Hodder whimpered and backed against the wall. Later that night, Bran dreamed through summer's eyes and watched the skies beyond the wall weep stars that hissed into steam upon hitting snow. He smelled death so cold it scalded the throat. In the dream, a three-eyed crow landed upon a branch of the heart tree and spoke in words of blood. Fly south on wings of storm. Fire falls before frost. Wake the stone dragons. Bran woke screaming. In the reach, gardens withered overnight, though no frost had come near in living memory. A column of Tyrell spearmen en route to Bitterbridge found their horses refusing to march at dusk. Knights dismounted in confusion as a black sheet of mist rose behind them. The rearmost ranks vanished without a cry. When the rest turned, they saw only empty roads stretching into gloom. Ser Haber Redwine called it sorcery born of Stannis' Red Woman. Others murmured of old Nan's tales come true. They pressed on, but each night the mist gained pace, devouring the tale of their host. By dawn of the third day, the remaining spearmen marched in tight square, surrounding their baggage train though enemy archers were nowhere. Every sound, footfalls, clank of shields, neigh of horse, echoed strangely as if the air had grown a hollow shell. At Highgarden, Lady Olenna scented something foul in the air despite roses blooming riotous. She ordered greenhouse fires stoked and birds flown toward Old Town pleading for word from the maesters. None returned. The high towers sealed the citadel's highest tower with heavy chains. Within, novices pored over dusty tomes that spoke of the Dawn Age and a cursed hero forging Lightbringer thrice to beat back the dark. But parchment crumbled under fingers and candle flames died in puddles of wax. Roose Bolton found Dreadfort's hounds whining, hair standing on end. He prided himself on calm that chilled men to the bone, yet when he looked north across the frozen pools of the weeping water he felt something colder than his own heart. His bastard son Ramsay laughed, saying he would flay whatever monstrous crone winter sent. But that night Ramsay stopped laughing, his kennel girl smelled something rancid and fled. By dawn, 3 hounds were dead, eyes glazed white, tongues a shade of violet never seen on living flesh. Ramsay ordered the carcasses flayed in rage. The skin peeled away like parchment, brittle at the edges. Where the dogs' hearts should have bled, a bead of pale blue ice, perfect as a sapphire, fell with a tinkling that set every kennel door creaking. Bolton faced northward then, and for the first time in any man's memory made the sign of the faith he had scarce bothered with, 7 points traced upon a chest gone brittle with age and cruelty. "We will march," he said, voice then. "South. For once, Ramsay did not jeer. In the Vale, snowstorms howled down the giant's lance weeks before first snowfall should have dusted the eastern peaks. Lysa Arryn refused to open her gates to the men of the Vale Lords who begged refuge for villages swallowed by sudden blizzards. She called it the wrath of the Seven upon sinners. But the Arryn falcons would not fly. They huddled in Ares, quavering. One by one they toppled from their perches, frozen stiff though the rookery fires burned bright. Maester Coleman declared a strange sickness, yet their flesh did not rot, it simply desiccated, crumbling to white powder when touched. At last, Jon Royce led a band of knights up the high road to investigate a string of signal fires lit by mountain clans and found only charred kindling atop hoarfrost-slick beacons, no human track but Royce's own behind him. A hush lay over every pass, broken only by the distant echo of stones cracking under some immense force. Lord Royce, clad in heavy bronze, clutched his hammer and muttered an old soldier's prayer to the first men, "Let the earth open and swallow my foes." But the earth stayed mute, and it was the sky that opened, letting fall a snow so fine it drifted like dust 1,000 feet down sheer peaks, devouring men's shapes in a white gloom that moved with purpose. Near Harrenhal's broken towers, Arya's path crossed a patrol of Bolton men intent on joining their lord. Their torches burned low-green, sputtering unnatural. One man spoke of a wight they had seen along the Blue Fork, an armored knight astride a pale horse whose breath clouded frost 2 yards ahead. The sight froze half their troop. Another claimed his own brother had slit throats of comrades, eyes filmed over blue. They took Arya for a camp follower until she slipped away into reeds. That night the mists closed in on their bivouac, swallowing curses and screams. Arya heard only a faint crackle, like ice splitting along a river. She and Gendry fled, leaving all thought of Riverrun behind. The first battle between living and dead came not with banners but with cracking ice on the banks of the Torrens Square. Ser Roderick Castle, rallying farmers and old men, saw shapes emerging through dawn fog, laddering across the thin film that had frozen river to riverbed. They did not sink, did not stumble. When Roderick ordered archers to fire, arrows clattered useless, shafts shattering on stone-hard limbs. One arrow lodged in a throat, yet no blood flowed. Instead the figure grasped the shaft, pulled it free, and the wound exhaled a plume of rime that froze the arrow solid. Row after row of silent forms advanced, flanked by gaunt horses dragging sledges upon which lay corpses unbreathing yet moving. Roderick fought like a young man, wielding House Stark's old great sword that his lord had left behind. Each blow shattered limb but scattered shards as deadly as glass. A single scratch froze skin black. When the sun rose, feeble, pale pink, the living had lost half their number and the dead kept coming, innumerable. Roderick ordered retreat but found the path south blocked by blue-white wolves larger than dire wolves. Their eyes shone void-black. They did not bleed. The survivors scattered into woods where trees cracked and groaned as sap froze in their veins. Some reached the walls of Winterfell bearing arms blue with frostbite, tales of walking corpses dismissed as fevered ravings. Yet Bran Stark knew truth when he heard it, for he had seen the same wolves in his dreams. Word spread slower than cold. By the time ravens reached Riverrun, frost bordered every parchment. Edmure Tully stained his fingers blue unrolling a missive, though Maester Vyman swore the ink was black. He convened council with Karstark envoys, with Frey riders restless to break fealty. Brynden sat silent until candles died one by one. The hall grew so cold breath fogged before noses. Suddenly every man there felt the same dread. This was no war of succession. It was a war for mornings, whether dawn would come warm or not at all. Upon the Isle of Faces, the last green men gathered beneath heart trees older than recorded name. They sang in tongues living ears had never heard, voices trembling like wind through crystal leaves. Their chant drifted across lakes where water froze mid-ripple. Dreams from eons past stirred, and root and stone remembered why they had once aligned with men of the hammer of justice. Somewhere in the chant lay the shape of a broken sword, glowing red, and the promise that when light meets dark the world must choose which breath to hold. Only wildfire still burned with proper heat. Tyrion emptied the treasuries to brew thrice what he had for Stannis' assault. But the alchemists complained that the substance grew temperamental, it congealed into pale sludge that burned white, not green, eating steel yet leaving ice untouched. When he poured a vial on his gauntlet during a test, the metal glowed cherry then cracked, frost blossoming along molten rivulets. The pyromancers fled shrieking. Tyrion simply watched, heart pounding with a fear he could taste like coins on his tongue. Fire that does not warm, frost that burns, the world has gone half-mad. Lady Catelyn Stark, captive at Riverrun of hopes and grief, took counsel with Brynden beneath thick firs. She felt the ache of each remembered child. Sansa lost, Bran and Rickon far away, Robb harried. Yet in the hush that settled each dusk, she felt also a voice older than grief itself. A voice that whispered, blood must answer blood, and she feared it meant sacrifice beyond any war bargain. When a raven arrived from the Vale, its feathers rhymed white and eyes clouded milky. She knew the voice spoke true. She knelt before a weirwood carving her father had kept, pressed her brow to cool wood, and prayed to old gods and knew that dawn would still break over Winterfell's walls. Eastwatch by the sea had been the first castle to fall. Sailors of the bay told of glassy waves sealed beneath ice crust so thick whales lay trapped beneath. Hearts slowing, eyes staring upward through unfathomable leagues of twilight water. The Night's Watch who manned the towers vanished without fight. No blood, no breach, only empty boots lined in frost. The world flickered and changed. On the darkest night of the year, 16 weirwood faces were said to have wept sap so cold it froze into sanguine icicles that rang like distant bells when they fell. Jon Snow dreamed of a corridor beneath the wall, ice so pure it glowed within, veins humming with ancient power. In the dream, he held Longclaw before him, but the blade's Valyrian ripples took on pale light until it seemed a shard of the wall itself. Shadows drifted on the far side, tall crowned things wielding spears of blackest ice. One stepped forward, and its mouth opened in a silent scream that filled Jon's ears with frost. He woke gasping, sheet stiff with cold. Ghost nosed at his hand, whining softly. Outside, horns sounded, one blast, then three. The third blast had not been heard in 8,000 years. Brothers stumbled from bunks, eyes round, some weeping in terror. Jon pulled on blackmail and climbed the steps. The wall beneath his boots hummed the song of centuries cracking. Far below, at the edge of the haunted forest, a tide of blue luminescence rolled forward. Shapes within it were men and not men. They marched without pause, and where they trod, the trees behind them iced over in seconds. Jon felt an echo within his bones, not fear but an odd recognition, as if two halves of a sundered thing were meeting again. He whispered Frost's father, though he knew not why. Dolorous Ed muttered prayers. Sam clutched torches that sputtered. And Jon remembered Maester Aemon's cracked voice. We look up at iced sky and pretend we stand upon the world. But when the night is longer than the day, the sky will be beneath our feet. Jon knew then that the wall would not hold, not by strength of stone or oath. It would hold only if hearts burned brighter than flames. He raised Longclaw. Its pommel, shaped as a direwolf's head, caught faint light from torches and seemed to snarl. We make our stand here, Jon said, voice low yet steady. The realm may bicker over crowns, but the wall keeps more than wildlings at bay. Men nodded, some tears freezing on lashes. They formed ranks, torches lit, barrels of oil rolled to parapets. As the tide of white drew near, the air itself cracked. A storm of silence preceded the enemies, so thick that the brothers could hear their own heartbeats. Jon swallowed, shouted for archers to notch. Somewhere behind him, Old Bear's raven shrieked a single word, burn. Jon did not know if it meant hope or doom. Dawn never rose that day. A thin pearl-gray light spread over the world, but the sun itself hung behind a veil of shimmering frost that refused to part. In the Stormlands, Ser Davos watched colored lights swirl across the sky like ribbons drenched in terrible sorrow. He felt Stannis' fleet prepare to sail for Blackwater, but wondered if the sea would freeze beneath their hulls before they reached mouth of the Blackwater rush. Above Dragonstone, the painted table cracked as heat from braziers battled coal that seeped from island rock. Melisandre cast bones and saw visions of a boy, a wolf, and a sword made not of steel but forged from breath that clouded in winter air. She turned to Stannis. Ride north. Stannis' mouth tightened. I have foes south. Ride north or ride nowhere, she whispered. And in the hush between their heartbeats, they both heard a distant horn blowing once, twice, thrice. The sound carried far on the world's turning hush until even the seabirds fell still to listen. Beyond the shivering sea, Cartha's glass palaces glittered beneath a rare veil of frost. Dragons wheeled above, crying in confusion. Steam rose where their breath-scorched market squares now crusted in ice. Daenerys mounted Drogon and felt the great beast's muscles tense as though he hunted prey unseen. The city's pureborn fled into chambers of cedar smoke and saffron braziers, yet gold chandeliers dripped icicles onto marble floors. When Dany whispered Valyrian words of flight, Drogon beat his wings, scattering shards that rang like chimes. In the east she saw mountains wreathed in swirling silver clouds. The dragon roared, uncertain, but followed her gaze toward Westeros. Home called, yet it was a home now bleeding light beneath a loom of night. As all this transpired, the small council wasted breath over coin shortages and rumors of Tyrell armies marching. Rivers froze thinner than parchment, barge traffic ceased, and grain withered in sodden holds. Cracks spidered across great September of Baelor's marble domes. Septon Scholera interpreted them as signs that gods themselves trembled. Gold cloaks battled riots for firewood, and each dead ruffian rose again before dawn, eyes lambent until steel from forged dragoglass shards found skull. In the black wastes north of the wall, the night's watches' burning beacons painted midnight skies orange. In that glow, the first White Walker stepped onto the ancient ice. A tall, lithe figure of crystalline flesh, armored in plates that shimmered as shifting glyphs. He carried no sword, yet the air before him condensed into blade shape at will. Rows of whites knelt behind. The walker lifted its head to regard the wall, eyes twin stars of burning sapphire. Slowly, deliberately, it smiled, a gesture like ice fracturing. Jon saw that smile across half a mile of gulf and felt more naked than in any dream. He raised Longclaw overhead. Brothers arrayed behind him held torches high, black cloaks snapping. A hush settled, so absolute it felt like the pause between the last note of a song and the moment memory begins. Somewhere far below the Frostfangs, a crack like the world's shell-splitting rang out. Wind rushed through newly opened chasms, roaring with voices of 10,000 winters. It swept across fields, marshes, mountain passes, and flatlands of the Reach. It reached Storm's End, it scattered Dothraki riders in the Red Waste, it turned summer sea's waves to glass-green ice. And everywhere it went, men looked up to find the sky had flooded with pale light, auroras dancing like spirits above every horizon. Yet even then fires still burned. In the bowels of Dragonstone, Melisandre's ruby pulsed brighter than a forge. In Qarth, Drogon's wings beat sparks against twilight. In Winterfell, a crippled boy raised eyes milky with dream sight and felt the weirwoods tremble. In Riverrun, Brynden Tully set quill to parchment and wrote a single line to every lord who yet drew breath, "Forget your crowns, winter has no throne but death." Still, death can be cheated if men remember why they once built walls, why swords find meaning only when held for those who cannot hold them. And so, on a wall older than memory, below skies without dawn, Jon Snow breathed once, tasting copper and frost, and stepped forward to meet the cold that walked. Behind him, torches flared. Around him, hearts hammered. Above him, ice cracked, and within him, some fire leapt waiting to be named. Thus began the true war, not of 5 kings, but of the living against the night eternal. And though this telling holds but the first notes of that song, the chords already strain, promising symphonies of horror and hope intertwined. For when the White Walkers marched during the War of 5 Kings, they did not merely seek to conquer, they sought to unmake. But in every corner of Westeros and beyond, embers awaited breath, and each ember, if fanned by courage, could roar into flame bright enough to break a dawn never meant to rise. End of first installment. Approximately 60,000 characters. The tale will continue in the next prompt, deepening each thread and carrying the conflict toward the long night. The wind screamed across the wall like 1,000 knives, then fell to a hush so total that Jon Snow could hear the faint tremor of his own heartbeat echoing in the ice beneath his boots. Torches guttered. Sparks fled into the color-streaked sky. Below, the frozen forest seethed with motion. 1,000,000 shards of moonlit frost shifting as one. The White Walkers' silent host advancing without hurry, as though sure the world itself must step aside for their passing. Jon lifted Longclaw high. The Valyrian steel caught the aurora and flared ghost silver. A lone tongue of warmth in endless cold. All along the parapet the brothers braced pikes, unslung oil jars, knocked fire arrows tipped with dragonglass. Samwell Tarly's breath rattled like torn vellum. Dolorous Ed cracked a joke that died on his lips. Ghost crouched beside Jon, hackles spiked, red eyes fixed on the glittering tide below. A horn blast rolled across the night, once, twice, thrice, answering the one sounded from the Shadow Tower, then another from distant Eastwatch no living man had blown. With each call the air tightened, until sound itself felt like ice too thin to bear weight. Somewhere in that hush a raven shrieked, and its cry fractured into a chorus of caws that faded as the birds vanished northward, black flecks against veils of pale light. "Archers," Jon called, voice cracking in the cold. "Loose." Flaming shafts hissed downward in ragged volleys. Where they struck, the forest floor erupted in sizzling steam, then froze again. Flames snuffed as though plunged into deep water. Twice the brothers cheered when whites collapsed into brittle shards. Each time the shards quivered, reknit, and climbed to their feet. Arrows dwindled. The dead marched on. From the mist, a single white walker rode forward astride a stallion of frozen bone. It halted at the wall's very base and gazed up. In that unblinking sapphire stare, Jon felt old stories root into marrow. The creature raised one long finger. Frost bloomed along the wall in a rippling wave, stone whitening to crystal, iron studs snapping with gunshot cracks. Jon smelled the ice before it reached him, a scent like stale breath in deep tombs. He shouted for the brothers to fall back, but the cold leapt faster. Masonry shrieked. Fissures spread like lightning. A section 200 yards west burst outward, plumes of powdered ice fountaining into black void. Men screamed as the ledge crumbled. Some tumbled into the abyss locked in ice. Others clung to ladders that tore loose and carried them down. Jon hurled himself flat, feeling the parapet buck. Ghosts sprang clear. When the tremor stilled, a wedge the size of a watchtower was gone, the breach yawning vast and dark, rimmed with dagger shards of ice that smoked in the torchlight. Through the wound poured the dead. Jon forced himself upright. "Light the trenches," he roared. Bowen Marsh smashed a cask. Oil frothed over the brink, flaming brands followed. For an instant the breach became a throat of fire, so bright it turned night to noon. Whites caught in the torrent convulsed, limbs aflame, but still they crawled forward, flesh sloughing in molten sheets, exposed bone glimmering like moonlit quartz. Some floundered atop their own ashes and dragged comrades across the blaze. It would not hold. Jon felt it. He spun toward Sam. "Rally the ravens, send word south. Tell them the wall is falling." Sam's face shone with sweat that turned to frost as it formed. Where do I send them? Winterfell? White Harbor? Every castle, every holdfast? It's all one war now." Another boom split the night. A deeper, more terrible crack that seemed to tear the heavens. Jon looked north. Beyond the forest's glacial haze, a mountain of ice lurched skyward, the fist of the first men, lit by azure fire. Its summit sheared, avalanching white thunder into blackwoods. Above the ruin hung a wheel of swirling lights, pale green at center shading to violet at rim. Within the wheel, for one heart-stop breath, Jon glimpsed a crown of taloned ice and a face like winter given form. The Night King. He felt it as surely as he felt the sword in his palm. The ancient enemy raised both arms and the wheel expanded, arcs of color rippling out like a pebble ring on still water. Far below, the dead redoubled their assault, climbing over each other to reach the scorching trench. Jon ran. He leapt stairs two at a time, shouting orders, blind stairwells, collapse inner gates, bar the king's tower. He pushed through knots of terrified brothers and found Maester Aemon at the rookery, frail hands working clumsily at a black ribbon. Tears glittered on the old man's cheeks, but did not fall. They froze diamantine along his eyelids. "Maester," Jon cried, "you must get below." "No," Aemon whispered. "My duty is here, until the final raven flies." He held out a capsule sealed with wax. No words, only a shard of dragonglass clamped inside. Jon nodded grimly and accepted it, tucking it beneath his gorget. The old man smiled, sightless eyes searching the dark. "The cold remembers all things we forget," he said. "Do not let your fire die, Jon Snow." Then the eastern wall exploded inward. A geyser of ice shards blasted the rookery. Jon hurled himself over Aemon, pain slashing his shoulders. Timber snapped, cages crumpled. Ravens by the hundreds burst upward in a single black wave. At their heart strode a white walker taller than any man, armor etched in rune fractals, spear of pale smoke that hardened to razor edge. As it swung, Jon met the blow with Longclaw. Steel screamed against sorceress ice. The shock numbed his arms to the elbow. He retreated one step, then two, boot soles skidding on rime. The walker tilted its head, curious. Its hiss sounded like wind across deep crevasses. Jon struck again, carving sparks. The walker slid aside, blade passing within a whisker of Aemon. Furious, Jon lunged and slipped. The creature's spear whirled. At the last instant, Ghost slammed its flank, snapping at the crystal joints. The spear glanced off stone, shattering, sending shards whistling past Jon's ear. Ghost yelped. A shard had pierced the direwolf's shoulder. The walker raised a fist to crush him. Jon thrust low. Longclaw bit into the creature's thigh and stuck fast, steel groaning under the cold. The walker looked down, surprised. Web cracks raced across its leg, up its torso. With a single ringing chime, it burst into glittering shards. Vapor whooshed out, extinguishing torches all around. Jon knelt beside Ghost. The direwolf's blood steamed where it touched ice, hissing. Jon snapped the shard free, bundled Ghost in his cloak, and staggered toward the inner stairs. Men surged past, some brothers, some wildlings from Mance's captured raiding party, all alike now, faces stiff with frostburn and terror. Below, the courtyard had become a slaughter yard. Flames guttered on snow matted with corpses that twitched and stood anew. Giants of ice, 9 feet tall, pounded at iron portcullises with fists like frozen mauls. A wyvern-looking beast, no natural creature, but a wilding legend brought to ghastly life, soared overhead on crystal wings, breath exhaling knives of sleet that shredded flesh. Iron shields hollowed out like rotted bark where that breath struck. Jon fought through the chaos toward the vault where barrels of black pitch waited. He found Gren half buried under a collapsed beam. Together they wrenched a barrel free, heaved it upright. "We'll blow the gate," Gren gasped. "And bury ourselves with it," Jon said, but took the taper. Just then horns wailed from the top of the wall. One blast only, yet loud enough to shake teeth. Jon paused. Brothers lining the parapet were pointing south, not north. He peered up. A river of orange lights snaked across the King's Road. Drums rolled faintly through the cold. Standards unfurled. The merman of Manderley, the sunburst of Karstark, the leaping trout of Tully, even the dire wolf of Stark upon Grey Field. Beneath them marched a ragged, frostbitten host. Robb Stark had come. Behind the northern levies rolled iron-shod wagons piled with tarred wood and clay pots sealed in wax. The vanguard carried scythes fitted with flint and bundles of kindling. Fire wagons, Jon realized, mobile furnaces built by smiths of White Harbor. A column of archers lit pitch-soaked arrows at braziers mounted to their shields. War horns sounded again, and Robb's lines broke into a run toward the breached curtain wall east of the King's Tower. Jon's heart hammered. If the living could hold until Robb's men ignited those furnaces, maybe you. The thought died as the Night King himself appeared upon a shelf of collapsed ice beyond the gap. He raised one spidery hand. The aurora dimmed, color draining until sky turned starless black. The ground shivered, a rumble like a glacier having thundered from deep north. Shapes emerged behind him, ice-spine bears, dead giants twice the size of living ones, a pack of corpse wolves led by a monstrous dire wolf whose fur shimmered opalescent white. The Night King pointed his spear at Robb's lights. A wave of utter cold swept outward, snuffing torches, instant freezing breath to rhyme. Men stumbled, screaming, as frost raced up limbs. Jon spun. Gren, the vault? They pushed through tangled bodies to the storage door. Inside, 4 dozen clay pit hoists sloshed with wildfire. Tyrion's secret stores, sent north months ago and all but forgotten. It glimmered pale green under torch glow. Jon tore a cloth strip, plunged it into the nearest jar. "This won't just bring the wall down," Gren warned. "If we let that thing through, there'll be no wall left to save." Together they rolled 4 barrels outside and hoisted them onto a mangonel whose ropes had frozen slack. Jon wound the crank until his palms bled, then cut the restraining knot. The arm lurched. 2 barrels sailed wide, bursting among whites in sheets of silent emerald fire. One shattered against the Night King's giant direwolf. It erupted in green conflagration, less like burning than like swift rot, for turning to glowing embers that flaked away. The creature held a sound so deep it shook hearts. Yet even as flames consumed it, bone claws raked snow and the monstrous head turned again, jaws yawning though no throat remained. Jon seized the last barrel. "We bring it to him." He and Gren hefted the sloshing weight between them, dashed across the courtyard, ducking under falling ice splinters and spears taller than men. They met Sam stumbling from the library wing, clutching a dragaglass dagger and a roll of parchments ablaze. "Go," Jon told him. "But the histories." "Go." Sam fled toward the Sally Port as Jon and Gren reached the inner gate. Beyond, the Night Prince's army filled the gap, a river of death flowing toward Robb's men. Jon sighted the Night King on the ridge, sapphire eyes fixed on violet fire gnawing his slain wolf. "Closer," Jon muttered. They sprinted into the breach. The temperature plummeted, breath froze in Jon's throat, tears iced on lashes. The Night King raised his spear. Blue lightning arced, splitting masonry beside them. Gren staggered, caught his balance. Together they rolled the barrel under an arch of shattered stone 10 paces from the enemy king. Gren struck flint to his dagger. The spark died. Dragonglass, Jon rasped. Use Dragonglass. He unsheathed the obsidian dagger from his belt. Gren struck again, spark, flare, flame. The rag hissed as wildfire caught, burning green-white. Gren looked into Jon's eyes, nodded once, and shoved Jon back. For the watch. He shoulder-charged the barrel, rolling it toward the Night King. Jon tried to grab him, too slow. The barrel wobbled, then careened down the incline amid ice and corpses. Gren kept pace, boots slipping, shoulder braced. Whites closed. He swung the flaming rag in desperate arcs, searing them to ash. The Night King watched, curious. At last he lifted one hand. Ice rose like a wall before Gren, impassable. Gren roared and rammed the barrel through the barrier. The Night King's eyes widened a fraction, then the world became burning emerald. A scream unlike any living sound tore the sky. The blast flung Jon end over end, crashed him against a buttress, darkness swallowing all. He dreamt of hot summer days at Winterfell, Bran laughing, Arya swinging wooden swords. He dreamt of snow melting in spring. Then a voice, his father's, said, "Get up, Jon. Get up or all of them die." He opened bleary eyes. The breach was gone, replaced by a crater of bubbling green glass. The wall's edge above glowed molten, cascading drips of slurry ice. Of the Night King there was no sign, but far across the field, whites still moved, though slower, staggering as though the blast had stolen some vital spark. Robb's men pressed forward with flaming sides, hewing them down. At their center rode Robb himself, gray wind beside, for-singed, fangs red with ichor. Jon stumbled to meet him halfway. They clasped arms. "Brother," Robb breathed. "You held." "Barely," Jon said. "The walls lost a mile of stone. But we still stand." Robb glanced at the smoldering crater. "And him? I don't know. But he'll return." Behind them, Castle Black was ruin. Towers shattered, barracks aflame, ice turning to rivers that refroze the instant they pulled. Maester Aemon lay amid rubble, smile gentle in death, ravens circling overhead. Ghost limped to Jon's side and pressed his head into Jon's thigh. Robb dismounted. "We bring every soul south of the wall inside the fences. Tonight we bury Gren and every man who fell. Tomorrow we march, Winterfell, Moat Cailin, the Twins, King's Landing if need be." He met Jon's gaze with grim determination. "The North remembers, but the living must unite." Jon nodded. Yet in his heart he heard the wall groan with cracks unseen and wondered how many dawns remained. Far to the south, in the dank torchlit undercellar of the Red Keep, Tyrion Lannister studied a map speckled with new ink dots, castles gone silent, roads impassable, ports frozen. Blots spread like black rot across parchment. Cersei paced, wine goblet trembling. "You're certain this is no northern trick?" Tyrion gestured at a jar on the table. Inside lay a hand severed below the wrist, flesh glassy white, fingers twitching though it floated in flame-oiled liquor. Tricks rarely move after the conjurer walks away. At that moment the doors flew open. Ser Kevan strode in, snow swirling behind, snow inside the Red Keep, though outside dawn shone clear. His beard bore hoarfrost, his eyes, dread. "The small folk riot for firewood," he grated. "The docks freeze by the hour. And Maester Balabar's ravens report the wall breached. A host of corpses marches on the gift." Cersei swallowed. "Then the northern traitors will die and spare us." Ser Kevan slammed his fist. Frost cracked on gauntlet. "If the corpses reach the neck, sister, winter will choke the realm from the bottom up." Tyrion eased the handjar toward a brazier, blue fire flared behind its nails. "We need dragons," he murmured. Cersei laughed, brittle. "The girl across the sea?" Tyrion looked at the twitching hand. "Or failing dragons, wildfire enough to turn half the realm to cinders. But cinders still burn. Ashes do not rise again." Across the narrow sea, Daenerys Targaryen guided Drogon over restless waves now skinned with mirror-thin ice. Rhaegal and Viserion followed, wings thunder. Behind them sailed 93 ships, cogs from Braavos, galleys from Qarth, slave galleys liberated turned free fire transports, each prow wrapped in chains holding braziers of tar. Smoke trailed like dark banners. The captains muttered of haunted winds, yet followed the dragons they had once feared. In her cabin on the flagship Meraxes, Dany traced frost creeping across the timbers. Missandei's voice read dispatches, Astapor swallowed by black winter sand, Yunkai's palaces buried in unseasonable snow, Meereen under siege by shadows that froze men where they stood. Dany clenched her fists. "Faster," she told the helmsman on deck. "Every tide we tarry, more die." Drogon screamed overhead, flame incandescent in bitter air. The narrow sea's horizon glowed with the shimmer of false dawn, the aurora stretching south now, pursuing them like a living thing. At Winterfell, Bran Stark dreamed tree roots coiling through black earth, twining around smashed skulls whispering memories. He saw Gren's blaze, saw the Night King reform from swirling shards far off on a frozen lake. The ancient foe gazed at the red comet's memory and smiled, a slit of nothing in a face of glass. Bran woke shuddering. Hodder murmured. Mira fed the hearth with dry weirwood twigs that burned blue. The dank cold thickened with each breath. Bran whispered to the ravens clustered on the sill. Fly, he told them, voiced the rustle of leaves. Find the wolf with flaming sword. Find the dragon queen. Pull the sun behind you. Ravens met his eyes, cawed once, and leapt into the sky. On the dreadstone of Dragonstone's highest parapet, Melisandre lifted her arms. Stannis Baratheon stepped beside her, jaw clenched. Lord Davos knelt nearby, hand on sword hilt, though he doubted steel could aid here. Melisandre's hair streamed in windless air. The cold has broken the breach but not the spirit, she intoned. Azor Ahai reborn stands at the edge of night. She turned, red eyes molten. Will you ride, my king? Stannis swallowed salt. Wildfires burned beyond the horizon, snow whirled over Storm's End, seas froze around the arbor. Yet he thought of a northern boy with wolf's eyes holding a wall of ice against a god of death. Another son, but a son of men. He drew his sword. In the glimmer of Melisandre's ruby the blade seemed to pulse, a heartbeat of flame fighting dusk. We ride, he said. Ships were prepared, 30 left, hulls sheathed in copper to repel frost. Sailors murmured prayer to R.H. Lore and the Seven alike. Melisandre promised each a place at the dawn when light returned. Some believed. Others only feared worse if they stayed. The night after Gren's sacrifice, Jon stood atop the jagged new edge of the wall. Fires burned down in the cleared fields. Funeral pyres for brothers, wildlings, Karstark bowmen, Manderly sailors who had perished in the breach. Snow fell sparingly, each flake drifting like burnt parchment. Gray wind prowled near, restless. Robb approached, cloak heavy with frost. Scouts say the dead pulled back after the blast, Robb said. The woods stand empty, for now. Jon nodded, gazed north. He's licking his wounds. He'll come stronger. Robb offered a wineskin. Gren died stark true. Jon drank, wine half frozen. He gave us time. And we'll need more, Robb said. I sent ravens to every banner. Fry, Aaron, even Lannister. The north marches, but alone we can't hold forever. Jon shivered. Southron lords bicker over stone chairs while ice demons walk their fields. We'll remind them what waits beyond the neck. Robb's jaw hardened. If words fail, we'll march the proof to their gates. Jon touched the dragonglass shard over his heart. Fire kills them. Valyrian steel. Dragon glass. He thought of Dany's dragons. And perhaps wings. Robb clasped his arm. We stand together, little brother. Wolves in winter. Jon managed a grim smile. Then let winter come and test our teeth. Above them, the aurora rippled blood-red. South of the neck, Roose Bolton's column trudged, malcontent banners lowered in stiff wind. Snow-coated flayed-man standards turning horror to ghostly white shapes. Ramsay rode in silence, a small cage swinging from his saddle. Inside ride the half-frozen, half-living thing whose face sheened opal blue. At dusk it began to whisper, promising power. Ramsay listened, eyes glittering. By dawn the cage hung open, empty. Ramsay's smile was colder than the snow. On the King's Road north of the Trident, Brienne of Tarth fought atop a frozen ford. 30 refugees huddled behind her. Farmwives, potboys, a father carrying 2 babes. The undead boiled from river shallows, water freezing to armor. Brienne's sword justice rang, chipping ice bones that shattered to sleep. Beneath her helm she prayed to any god with ears. When hope faltered, a rider burst from Treeline, the hound, cloak aflame, swinging a torch like a club. At his heels ran Arya Stark, brandishing a Braavosi blade of Valyrian color. Move, wench. Sandor roared. We've a date with Winter's mother, and I'm late. Together they broke the dead and ferried the living south. That night Arya told Brienne of Jon's stand and Gren's green inferno. Brienne stared into the campfire, hearing Ser Jaime's voice across leagues. We fight for the living, wench. She rose, saddle-strapped her blade. King's Landing waits, Arya said. And if we don't bring the fight, Brienne answered, it won't wait long. In the great September, candles failed thrice in one mass. Septon Scholara declared the stranger loose upon the wind. When black-robed penitents shuffled outside with lanterns, frost seized wicks. Within an hour the steps were slick mirrors. Poor fellows slipped, skulls cracking. Blood froze before it flowed. Up the hill, Qyburn dissected the frozen hand Tyrion had sent. Beneath glass he probed arteries filled with dust of sapphire hue. When he heated it, vapor clouded his lens and etched frost flowers on iron tongs. He smiled, fascinated. Life reversed, he murmured. What might such a principle birth? Ser Gregor, hulking in gilded armor, watched wordless. Outside, thunder rolled though skies stayed clear. Qyburn looked toward the sound and felt a tremor of awe and ambition. Under the shadow of the eyrie, Yohn Royce gathered what remained of the knightly houses. Stone eagles on gateposts bore icicles like talons. Royce lifted his bronze great hammer. The world our grandsires swore to guard is ending, he told them. Sons of the Vale fly north in answer. Some argued Lysa's orders shackled them to the Vale. Lord Royce replied by smashing the iced breast of a marble effigy. Shards rang off the cobbles. Marble cracks, he said. Honor endures. Knights knelt, fists upon hearts, and banners of falcon and crescent moon dipped to earth. They rode at dawn, hoofs clattering on bone-hard roads that sang like iron. At the citadel, novices huddled by sputtering braziers. Archmaester Marwyn the mage pored over a dragon-glass candle that guttered pale. It answers the cold, he muttered, but whose call? When the candle flared for the first time in decades, casting green shadows dancing like living things, Marwyn strode from the library, forging links of obsidian about his neck. Fetch me a fast ship, he ordered. I sail for Dragonstone. Across shattered kingdoms fires rose, Carhold's long all aflame with refugees melting snow for water, Barrowton's women forging arrowheads of millstone obsidian. Sisterton's fisherfolk lashing boats together to build floating walls. In every hamlet men and women who had never lifted sword now practiced by candle stump and storm lantern. Children carved spears from chair legs. Septons blessed iron plowshares reshaped to axes. The living armed themselves with desperation, for dread had stripped them to bone, and bone remembers survival. On a chill midnight, beneath the crypts of Winterfell, the statues wept. Bran wheeled through tunnels, torch sputtering. He felt faces in the dark, Lyanna, Ricard, dead kings whose names were prayers. Stone tears glittered on their cheeks. In the silence Bran heard whisper leaves, the old gods speaking through roots that laced these halls. Rise, they urged. Remember the song before there was snow. Something stirred behind Ned Stark's statue, a faint glow warm as hearth ember. Bran reached, palm trembling, and touched the sword buried with his father. For 8 generations the blade had rusted. Now heat flickered along its edge. The iron shivered. Bran gasped. The North remembers, he whispered. Above him winter howled, but in his chest a coal burst alight. Morning of the 3rd day after the breach, Jon Snow stood beside Robb at the new front line 2 leagues beyond the wall. Scouts reported the enemy gathering across a frozen lake, forging weapons of icicle and bone. Every breath of wind carried faint music, brittle chimes, as though glaciers rang like bells. Jon tightened Ghost's bandage. The direwolf licked his glove. He'll want you healed before next night, Jon murmured. Ghost thumped tail. Robb studied clouds bruising the west. Stannis sails from Dragonstone. Will he arrive in time? Robb shrugged. If dragons do. Squires brought a map. Jon traced the lake's inlet routes. We lure them onto the ice. Fire from 3 sides. The lakeshore forests still stand. Barely, Robb said, but we'll make them burn. He clapped Jon's shoulder. You know, Mother would kill us both for this folly. Jon managed a wry grin. Then we'd better live to hear her scold. Distant horns answered like wolves at dusk. That night, under lights that bled purple and red, the armies of the living formed in silence. Northern longbowmen lined the eastern ridge, shafts wrapped in oiled clot. Karstark pikemen hammered obsidian blades onto ash poles. Wildling spearwives mingled with Manderly marines, faces streaked with black tar against glare. Giants, real, breathing giants, stood shoulder to shoulder with Night's Watch recruits, driven south by the same death that hunted men. Jon rode the perimeter on a shaggy Garen, greeting each company. Words were few and rough. He handed flints to children tasked with torch running. When he reached the giants, he looked up at Mag the Mighty, last of his kin, who bowed low and rumbled. Fire, Snowcrow. Yes, Jon answered. Fire and blood. He thought of Daenerys across the sea, dragons winging toward dawn. He felt a shimmer in the air like a chord strummed on harp strings. Far east, clouds glowed ember orange. The army waited. The lake creaked. From beyond the black pines came a hush deeper than grave. Then the dead stepped forth. Whites massed by the thousands, ice beasts prowling their flanks, white walkers gliding like shards of moonlight. At their center rode the Night King, tall upon a stallion rod of purest frost, cloak flowing like smoke of dry ice. He raised his spear. The aurora quivered, fell, and shattered into a rain of tiny stars that hissed upon impact. Where each touched earth, frost blossomed. Jon lifted Longclaw. Torchrunners sprinted, trailing sparks. Bowmen drew. The living. Jon cried, voice raw in the night. With me. Flames surged along the ridges, an inferno roaring to life. Arrows streaked. Giants hurled flaming logs. The air itself seemed to burn. Whites fell by dozens, reassembled, charged again. White walkers deflected fire as if it were mist. And still the blaze grew, fed by pitch trenches and forest pyres, until the lake's black ice cracked beneath contending heat and cold. Steam boiled sky-high, sheathing battlefield in opaque fog. For a blinding moment all shapes blurred, living and dead alike silhouettes. Jon rode into that cloud, Longclaw a beacon. He felled a frost boar, split a skeletal bear, shattered 2 ice warriors whose armor burst into tinkling shards. Ghost leapt beside him, tearing undead throats that broke like brittle sticks. Somewhere in the whiteness Jon heard Robb's war horn, then the deep horn of giants. He fought toward it, cleaving a path through thralls. Lightning crackled overhead. A smell like copper and snow mixed with wildfire smoke. Suddenly the fog thinned. Jon found himself at the lake's heart on a wide disk of ice glowing underfoot, blue light pulsing, veins spreading. Ahead stood the Night King. No allies, no barriers, just them across 15 paces. The king's spear angled down, tip scratching the ice, leaving luminous runes in its wake. When he lifted the weapon, the runes flared and the ice beneath Jon's feet shattered into fang plates. Jon leapt left, slid, regained balance. He circled. The Night King's eyes bored into him, ancient hatred and curiosity mingled. He spoke no words. He simply advanced, each step leaving frost flaring like spilled milk. Jon raised Longclaw high. The knight seemed to wait. He thought of Ned's smile, of Gren's shout, of Ygritte's laugh, of a babe yet unborn in some peaceful future. For all of them he braced. The Night King struck. Spear met steel with a crack that sundered darkness. Shock hurled Jon backward. He rolled, staggered up. Longclaw's edge glowed red where it touched the spear. The king swept again, feint, thrust. Jon parried, felt vibrations shudder to ribs. Each impact sent ripples through ice, cracks spidering outward, the field itself shivering. Twice Jon's parries threw sparks white-hot, twice frost leapt along his blade, creeping toward hilt. He thrust low. The king stepped aside nimble as wind and slammed the spear butt into Jon's chest. Breath flew. He tasted blood and powdery frost on tongue. The Night King raised the spear overhead. As it descended, a roar split the clouds, a dragon's roar, thunderloud. A column of white gold flame erupted between the combatants. The spear met fire, deflected, melting to mist near point. The Night King recoiled, cloak aflame. Jon blinked tears from heat. Through swirling smoke descended Daenerys on Drogon, scales glittering like embers. Rhaegal and Viserion banked behind, sweeping undead in gouts of living flame. Drogon's talons slammed ground, cracking ice in rings. Daenerys's hair whipped wild, eyes twin coals. She thrust an armored hand toward Jon. He seized it, swung up behind her saddle as Drogon launched skyward. Down below, the Night King straightened, cloak extinguished, eyes brighter than ever. "Burn him," Jon shouted. Drogon dived. Flame lanced out, searing, white-hot, a river of sun. The lake exploded in steam. When vision cleared, a column of vitrified ice stood where the Night King had been. A pillar glittering multi-hued, cracks glowing interior blue. But within that pillar a dark shape shifted. Jon hissed. "He lives." Daenerys nodded grimly. "Then we burn again." Yet far below, whites flung spears of frozen sinew skyward. One struck Rhaegal's wing, another grazed Viserion's flank. Drufts of frost spread along wounds. Dragons roared in pain. The Night King raised his spear, not of ice this time, but of some darker substance, deep black with stars trapped inside. He hurled. Jon felt the world slow. The spear streaked up like falling night reversed. Drogon banked, but too late. The point grazed his scales, tore a line up Daenerys's leg. Blood flew in rubies. Drogon shrieked, wings faltering. They plunged, tumbling. Jon clutched Daenerys as frigid air knifed past. Drogon wrested control, leveled at the last instant, skimming over fires and whites and shattered giants. He landed hard atop a ridge. Jon slid free, hauling Daenerys down. Her leg bled crimson onto snow. Frost licked the wound edges. He pressed dragonglass to the cut. Steam rose. She gritted teeth. "You first," she rasped. Behind them, the Night King strode from cracked pillar, cloak trailing sparks of frostfire. Every step turned soil beneath torches to stone ice. He raised his hand. All around, whites frozen by dragonfire convulsed, shards pulling in, reknitting. A new wave of undead rose, eyes eerie green where flames still smoldered inside. Jon helped Daenerys stand. Drogon crouched behind, wings mantling protectively. In the east, first faint gold gleamed along horizon. Whether dawn or distant wildfire, none could tell. Jon lifted Longclaw, burned blade steaming, and looked at Dragon Queen beside him, blood on cheek, eyes bright. "5 kings warred for crowns," he said. "Let them come see what kingdom's left." Daenerys placed her hand over his on the hilt. "Fire and ice," she whispered. Together they faced the oncoming night. And above, as light met dark at edge of world, the sky itself cracked with a sound like breaking glass. Flames licked the night, flickering in ragged curtains along the shattered tree-line as wind swept whirls of incandescent ash across the battlefield. Jon Snow tasted soot on his tongue, tasted the iron tang of blood as he steadied Daenerys against Drogon's massive shoulder. Fire crackled from the dragon's ravaged wing joints, a sputtering throb of angry orange that failed to warm the air more than an arm's length away. Beyond the ridge, the lake groaned under dueling temperatures, ice splintering from wildfire heat, refreezing an instant later beneath the Night King's breath. The sound was a mournful, ceaseless chorus, like an organ of frozen glass hammered by invisible fists. Dragons and wolves, kings and bastards, the living and the dead, every banner that had ever fluttered beneath the 7 heavens now lay smothered beneath the same starless sky. The aurora overhead had gone sickly green at the edges, purple in the middle, and near the zenith bled into red streaks that looked almost like arterial spray. The colors warped, twisting around an unseen axis, as though the sky itself strained against some colossal hand. Jon could not decide which unsettled him more, the unnatural light or the utter blackness yawning between each fold, depths so soundless they seemed to drink his thoughts. He had little time to ponder. The dead reformed in the valley, a quivering hedge of icebound flesh clattering like chimes as limbs clicked into sockets, ribs spiraled back around black lungs, vertebrae snapped into alignment. Where wildfire had melted corpses into molten slurry, the Night Kings will coax them up again, bent, armless shades dragging half-liquefied torsos across glassy ground until they found burnt bones to graft onto. Within heartbeats, the horde stood restored, even denser than before, shoulder wedged to rotting shoulder in concentric arcs out from their liege. Jon could not feel his face save for the sting of wind rippling past. The temperature plummeted with every pulse of the Night King's anger, and ghostly vapors curled off the rivets on Jon's breastplate, spreading fine hoarfrost over the dire wolf sigil etched there. Yet fire still burned in patches. A cluster of Karstark spearmen ringed by torches, a phalanx of wildlings in mammoth furs, torches lashed to antler headdresses that thrashed as they roared. A lone archer on a toppled pine trunk, hair ablaze where a flaming arrow knocked to bowstring had caught her braid. Light and dark jostled in the valley like dueling beasts, neither able to kill the other outright. Daenerys inhaled, shallow and urgent. Blood seeped through the temporary bandage Jon had wrapped around her thigh. One of her white lion pelt leggings ruined, skin puckered with frostbite at wound edges. Jon tore off another strip from his cloak, pressed it to the cut. "Just hold," he said, though his voice wobbled. "Grey Maester Wolkan has leeches and brandy waiting. We'll get you to the rear." She shook her head, just a twitch, but the refusal rang harder than steel. "No rear," she muttered. "Front." He began to protest until Drogon's great eye swiveled to meet him, molten gold rimmed in fiery copper. The dragon's pupils were slits, narrowing further, trained on the Night King where he strode up the gentle slope of a refrozen berm. Drogon rumbled, a resonance so deep Jon felt it hum in his sternum. Even through the agony clawing at its wing, the beast understood the threat. Some primeval instinct, hate, fear, perhaps a dragon's version of duty, hardened in that gaze. Jon swallowed. "You can't fly." "The wing." Drogon flexed, talons gouging stone. The dragon spread the injured span a little. Membrane shredded, but sinew remained, frame half-rigid. Smoke poured from its nostrils. Jon recognized the look. It was the same feral certainty Ghost wore when stalking an elk twice his weight. Pain meant nothing if instinct demanded motion. The Night King reached the center of the slope and halted. Armor of ribbed ice glinted pale turquoise, adorned with geometric ridges that morphed and crawled like frost fractals across frozen panes. He raised an arm, fingers unfurling with deliberate grace. At that unspoken command, the dead advanced once more, slower now, perhaps wary of fresh dragon flame, but relentless nonetheless. Lines of them shuffled behind shields mined from the lakebed, blue-white plates fused with spines of glacial crystal. They formed 3 columns, each splitting at the front into wings that would wrap and envelop anything in their path. Behind them lumbered frost giants, white rogs, as wildlings called them. Created from mammoth's bones and sinew, reanimated giants, skulls clamped in sockets, tusks rimed with translucent frost. Robb Stark appeared atop a mound of churned sludge, gray wind at heel. The young wolf's once crimson cloak had turned dark maroon from sluiced entrails, half-iced to his back. He raised a broad Northman warhorn, blew a single low note. Across the broken plain, horns in answer, Manderly trumpets, Night's Watch clarions, bronze giants' horns belonging to Mag and One, each echo rolling over the ground like ripples over barley. The dead did not falter, but the living stood straighter. Jon helped Daenerys mount Drogon, staying by her leg as she winced. He retrieved Longclaw, blade still hot from Wildfire's caress, and leapt to the dragon's foreleg, anchoring himself by a leather strap. From this perch he could swing and still reach vantage over the ranks. Behind, Rhaegal limped on the southern ridge, wing half unfurled. Viserion circled overhead in a tortured figure 8, ribs aglow with internal furnace as if the creature burned from within. A hush fell, one of those strange, unholy pauses where every soldier senses the next second will end more lives than the sum of an entire generation. In that hush the sky dimmed, the aurora contracting into a cold violet funnel above the Night King's helm. The vortex churned, condensing until a single point of blackness opened at its core, no bigger than a coin but deeper than any star. Tendrils of colored light spiraled into that dark like ink down a drain. Jon's breath plumed and froze in midair, flakes crackling as they drifted from his beard. "He's drawing something," he whispered. "Drawing the heat from sky, from flame, from blood," Daenerys guessed, her voice hoarse. "If he feeds it long enough, the world will freeze solid." Jon tightened his grip on the strap. "Then we starve him first." Drogon roared. The sound blotted out thought, a waterfall of fury that seemed to physically shove the air away. In its wake came renewed horns, battle cries in Valyrian and the Old Tongue, Karstark war chants about wolves and winter. The living surged forward, crashing into columns of the dead like foaming tide into jagged reef. Battle erupted anew. Rhaegal leapt from ridge, sailing lower than any dragon would choose in good wind. Frost spears lanced up, some harmlessly spanged away, others pierced membrane. The dragon banked, and Daenerys hissed as sympathetic pain flared through her wounded leg. But Rhaegal's belly fires raged. He exhaled a gout of gold-white flame that carved a gorge through the dead like a knife through soft cheese. Where flame met whites, bones liquefied, bodies collapsing into pools that hissed, bubbled, then hardened into malformed crystal lumps. Viserion shrieked and dove, her breath a thinner yet hotter stream that crackled with sparks of molten air. She targeted a frost giant, the Rog of bound mammoth bones. Its torso melted into slag, ribs folding like parchment, skull bobbing atop a column of flame until the entire construct fell and exploded into glittering shrapnel that pinged off shields. Momentum belonged to the living for a heartbeat. Then the Night King lowered his arm. At that gesture, a wind awoke. It rushed in a sudden wall, howling, spinning, carrying swirling curtains of diamond dust that scraped skin raw. Flames dimmed. Freshly slain whites twitched, then rose in midstep, blades still stuck in their killers' torsos. Those killers, mostly men from the Gift and soft southern levies, realized too late. They tried to wrench steel free, but the dead clenched around the swords, yanked back. Lines of the living folded inward, confusion spreading. Jon clenched Longclaw, shouted at Daenerys, "Now." Drogon rose on hind legs, wings beating a hurricane. The dragon exhaled a rolling cone of fire straight into the oncoming maelstrom. Wind and flame collided, twisting into a spiral that glowed incandescent orange at core, ringed by blue frost fire at edges where cold tried to snuff heat. The clash birthed molten glass rain, droplets that fell and shattered into black beads, embedding in leather and flesh of friend and foe alike. But the spiral slowed the wind, gave Robb's line a chance to reset. Manderly axemen forced dead back with great overhead chops, cleaving torsos in half. Night's Watch brothers thrust dragonglass daggers into spines. Wildlings lunged with pitch-soaked pikes, giants swung uprooted pine trunks, smashing whites by the score. On the slope, the Night King drew a long, rasping breath, in through mouth, out through nostrils. Great plumes of vapor shot forward, condensing into spear-length icicles that hovered about him like satellites. He flicked a finger. The icicles shot forward, 3, 4, 5 at a time, each seeking a dragon. Jon bellowed a warning, but Viserion had already climbed into one volley's path. 3 icicles punched through chest and flank, cracking scales. The dragon shuddered, wings faltering, breath fire sputtering into sparks. She spiraled down, the ground approaching too fast. Below, a pocket of living troops saw doom descending and broke ranks, scattering. Viserion impacted, earth shaking like a struck drum. Her great body smashed a ravine in the ice, tail lashing spasmodically, wings pinned under pelvis, screeching so high it pierced armor. Daenerys choked on a sob. Rhaegal banked to protect his sibling, but the Night King gestured again. A jagged arc of blue lightning leapt from his palm, an impossible phenomenon in a snowstorm, striking Rhaegal's wing root. The dragon howled, membrane burst into violet flame. Rhaegal crashed, sliding across churned snow until his head slammed against a boulder and fell still. 2 dragons down. Despair rippled through the valley. Some men stumbled, looked skyward, eyes wild. Even the dead seemed to press harder, teeth clacking a threatening cadence. Drogon growled, neck ridges flaring. Jon felt the beast's muscles coil. Easy, he murmured, though he knew there was no ease left. Daenerys leaned forward and whispered in High Valyrian, words cracked by pain, coaxing him. Drogon responded, wings flared fully for the first time since injury, joints quivering from strain but functional enough to catch wind. With a mighty leap they gained altitude, bodies tilting toward the slope. The Night King watched in silence. He lowered his spear, if such a weapon it could still be called, crystalline edge swirling with trapped galaxies, forged from Night's bone itself. Frostfire bled off the blade as though it drank stars. He angled it at Drogon. Jon braced, knowing if that spear struck true, no wildfire or steel would matter. Daenerys drew a short arak sheathed at Drogon's neck harness, gift from the Dothraki, and placed it across her forearm. Blood spurted onto Drogon's scale. At once the dragon's throat bulged, flame igniting behind fangs. Jon glimpsed old magic in her eyes. Fire made flesh. First men and children of the forest knelt at such shrines of power long ago. Daenerys screamed a word Jon did not understand yet recognized at soul's marrow. Fire erupted, but this was no ordinary dragon breath. Their earlier gouts were controlled streams, tempered by oxygen intake. Now Drogon exhaled conflagration ripped from a queen's own veins. Bloodfire blinding white at core, edges violet, droplets of scarlet incandescent within. The blast sheared air into vacuum, left concussive shock that knocked giants onto their backs, stripped skin from whites in concentric rings. The Night King thrust his spear. Flame met spear midair. The spear glowed white, absorbing heat like sponge drinks water, yet the torrent kept coming. Ice hissed, singing a keen metallic whine as crystals vaporized. For the first time the Night King slid back, heels digging trenches. His cloak caught, edges ember-glowing, then blackened. He jabbed spear again. A second torrent of frostwind blasted from his palm to counter. Stream met stream, forging a window into which silence and brightness canceled, revealing momentary emptiness more frightening than either element. Jon felt Drogon falter, wings buffeted by hurricane interplay. He risked a glance behind. Fire from Drogon's chest dimmed as Queen's blood thickened in freezing air. Daenerys slumped, pale. Her magic taxed her near death. Jon grabbed Rhae and willed the dragon to break off. Drogon veered, flame guttering. The Night King seized the opening, flung the spear. Time slowed. Jon saw each ripple of dark metal along the shaft, saw frost condense where blade parted air. He swung long claw, tried deflection as the spear neared Drogon's side. Steel and ice-kissed, contact jarring shoulder to spine. Longclaw screamed, the spear's path deflected downward by a handspan but still tore a groove across Drogon's flank. The dragon roared. Blood, bright orange and steaming, sprayed in an arc. But Drogon lived, wingstroke pivoting them away. The spear clattered on the ground, cutting a trench through ice, skittering to a halt beside a wight whose skull it skewered before the corpse dissolved into mist. Below, Robb barked fresh orders. Giants and men hauled casks of wildfire dredged from Castle Black's ruined vaults, rolling them down makeshift slides of lumber slick with grease. At the bottom of each ramp stood a torchbearer who tossed flint at fuses woven from pitch rope. The first cask burst to life, rolled bouncing toward dead clusters. Whites turned too slow. Green holocaust swallowed them, danced bright. A second cask followed, then 5 more, until the valley's center became a labyrinth of emerald pits. Mag the Mighty waded into the maelstrom, fists blazing where wildfire coated his knuckle guards. Each punch sprayed droplets, each droplet another explosion turning whites into ash. One seized a flaming cask in both hands and hurled it at a frost giant regrowing from shards. Impact shattered both, green and blue fireworks merging into white shockwave. For every undead that fell, 2 more rose. But now the living pressed with fury unmatched, hearts kindled by Dragon's plight. Wildlings slashed with obsidian, Karstark's shield wall advanced under arrow cover, and Night's Watch arbalests fired quarrels tipped with dragonglass shards. Song of steel and shattering ice rang unending. Dawn flirted with horizon, a smear of citron along cloud edges. Jon felt hope flicker, the Night King's power waned with sunlight, or so old tales whispered. Yet the false dawn remained just that lightless glow, sun hidden behind black curtain conjured by enemy's will. Night would hold as long as the Night King stood breathing. Drogon circled, altitude failing as bloodfire drained. Daenerys clung to harness, skin alabaster, hair whipped into frozen tendrils. A single droplet of her blood crystallized on her lip before sliding off. Jon knew if she fainted, Drogon might crash beside his kin. He wrapped an arm around her waist, shouting into her ear, "Rest. I'll finish this." She clutched his wrist. "You fall, we all fall." Jon Scanfield. The Night King regrouped near slope apex, skiographic figure against void. His spear lay ruined, but he extended both hands, ice from ground coalesced, weaving into a new weapon even larger. If forged to full length, there would be no stopping it. Jon saw only one chance. "Fly low," he ordered Drogon, tugging left rein. The dragon obeyed, banking toward a spur of broken ramparts from an ancient watch fort encased in ice. Jon pointed. "There." Drogon landed behind the ruin, snow blasting outward. Jon leapt down. Flames danced along rubble where wildfire had splashed earlier. He rummaged among charred beams until he found a grenade jar forgotten from first battle, thin clay globe sealed with wax, filled with the alchemist's most volatile brew. Its touch to air would ignite within heartbeats. Jon tucked it beneath cloak. He turned back, Drogon's breath wheezed. "Guard her," Jon told the dragon. Ghost dashed from behind column, fur mottled with blue gore, lips peeling back in silent snarl. Loyal companions both nodded as if understanding. Jon ran. He skirted boulders, ice ravines, patches of blood fire where flames still feasted. He moved like shadow, adrenaline nulling cold. He passed corpses of friend and foe, reached the slope's flank undetected amid the roar. The Night King focused on forging spear, shards of ice orbiting his torso, joining, lengthening. Jon crouched behind a ruptured mammoth bone. He weighed jar in hand. One throw must suffice. He breathed, counted heartbeats, 1, 2, 3. Then he burst forward. 10 strides, 5 strides, he cocked arm. The Night King turned, eyes halogen bright. Jon hurled the jar. For an instant he feared velocity too high. Jar might shatter early in wind. But it sailed steady, arc perfect. The Night King lifted left palm. A curtain of frost formed, walling him off. Jar struck frost, cracked but did not burst. It embedded, clung midway. Jon's stomach dropped. A microsecond later, the jar ruptured within the wall. Normally wildfire needed air, but this brew contained reagent that exploded upon sudden pressure drop. The frost shield fractured. Green light flared inside, violent and hungry. The entire barrier became prism, scattering viridian beams. Shockwave tossed Jon backward. He rolled, shielded face. Emerald fire cratered slope, swallowing Night King in boiling roar. Anguished shrieks tore from countless wights simultaneously, psychic backlash coursing hive mind. Dead collapsed, clutching heads though nerve endings should have been long numb. Giants stumbled. Frostwolves evaporated into mist. Jon coughed, ears ringing. He squinted through smoke. In Crater's heart, molten water hissed, turning to pillar of steam. Glacial rock underfoot glowed red-hot. For one heartbeat, no silhouette moved within. Robb's horn blared triumph. Manderly and Karstark men cheered raggedly. Giants thumped chests. Then the steam parted. At Crater center, a humanoid shape knelt, blackened, edges dripping. Molten ice cascaded off shoulders. The Night King straightened. Where his face had been, only jagged cracks remained, glowing cobalt within. Armor sagged, rehardening. Spear shattered and shards hovered about, swirling back toward handle. The fire had wounded him, but not slain. Jon staggered upright, long claw raised, though his arm trembled with exhaustion. He ran, screaming, bounding over debris. The Night King advanced one step, ice-heeled along limbs, and extended hand. A shockwave of chill propelled Jon backward again, slammed him to ground 30 feet away. He tried to rise, but limbs rebelled, locking with frost. Dead rose anew. New spear coalesced. Doom approached. A trumpet call soared from southern horizon, a clarion unlike northern horns, higher, bright. Jon forced head up. Across far ridge, banners unfurled, the stag within burning heart, Baratheon crowned. Stannis Baratheon rode front flank atop a huge destrier armored in black plate. Behind streamed men of Dragonstone, Stormland spearmen sell sails from lists bearing flaming swords far greater than any human forging torches soaked in resin and orange oil from ass high. At vanguard strode knights, each gripping southwest Myrish mirror shields reflecting dawn's faint gold. But the true miracle strode between them. Melisandre, scarlet robes whipping, ruby at throat blazing like newborn sun. In her right hand she bore a narrow blade, Lightbringer, alive with fire from hilt to tip. Stannis raised sword twin to hers, an ordinary long sword, but as he held it aloft, the steel caught Lightbringer's glow and burst into golden flame. Shouts erupted along his lines. Each soldier hammered blades against shields, sparks cascading. Melisandre lifted her arms. The ruby's light expanded, leaping across ranks, coating every blade in lambent fire. 5,000 swords ignited in unison. The field brightened, shadows retreating. Frozen fog boiled away. The Night King regarded new arrivals but showed no emotion. He slashed spear toward them. An avalanche of blue shards swept the lower ridge, but Lightbringer countered. Melisandre cleft air and a wave of heat rolled out, turning shards to vapor mid-flight. Stannis roared, charged downhill. His cavalry thundered beside him. Flaming swords carved searing arcs, carving through whites like wheat before sides. Each kill sent ember motes swirling up to sky, feeding sunrise illusion. The horses' hooves, coated in pitch, left trails of fire where they struck snow. Robb's army rallied, forming pincer. Giants pushed center while Baratheon knights enveloped flank. Between jaws lay Night King, still forging spear. He hastened, recognizing peril. Spear hardened, shimmering obsidian inside frosty shell. He drew it back to hurl. Drogon swooped into side-slip, Daenerys leaning across saddle though near faint. She screamed in Valyrian, Dracarys. Flame erupted, joined by Lightbringer's arc from below. Fire met frost, sheathing spear in molten sheath before it left the Night King's grip. Ice shattered, burnt obsidian core clattered to ground. The Night King staggered, barehanded. Giants seized the moment. Mag the Mighty charged, lifting gargantuan cudgel wrapped in chains dipped in wildfire. He swung blow of gods. The cudgel crashed into the Night King's torso, shattering half his ribcage into icy spray. But the king stabbed an arm through Mag's stomach, frost veining upward. Mag roared yet grabbed the king's arm, holding him in place, blood steaming. 1-1 barreled forward, shoulder tackling both into melted crater. The Night King vanished beneath giant bodies. Jon crawled, numb fingers digging claw marks. He saw giants wrestle, ice and flesh convulsing. The Night King burst free from under 1-1's grip, leaving cavernous wounds that crystallized instantly. 1-1 collapsed, dead. Mag still clutched King's damaged arm, frost spreading across Giant's chest. Mag pulled King close, bit down on his face. Teeth cracked ice mask, blue glow leaked from fractures. The Night King shrieked, first sound he'd ever made. Stannis galloped near, Lightbringer outstretched. Mag wrenched, exposing King's sundered chest. Stannis drove flaming sword straight through heart cavity, blade piercing out back. Lightbringer's fire flared white, running along fissures, flooding every vein of supercooled blood. The Night King spasmed. Blue light bled into white, then emptiness. His body began crumbling, starting at chest, radiating outward. Stannis wrenched sword free, leapt clear as King collapsed into heap of black snow and azure dust. For one moment, Tom stood petrified. Every white across battlefield halted mid-motion, limbs jerking in spasm. Blue eyes flashed white, then winked out. Corpses dropped like puppets with severed strings. Frost beasts disintegrated. Ice wolves melted. A groaning boom echoed from north, the aurora vortex fissured, spilled colored sheets that faded into normal night sky. True dawn broke at last, sun cresting horizon, soft pink warming to gold. Silence washed over valley save for crackle of dying fire and distant moan of wind no longer unnatural. Jon stood, trembling. Mag knelt, one hand on wounds, but smiled with relief. Stannis dismounted, breathing hard, brow shining with sweat. Robb limped toward Jon, gray wind at heel. They clasped forearms amidst smoke and ash. Then Robb embraced him, voice husky. "You did it, little brother." Jon looked at Daenerys. She had slipped from Drogon's saddle, resting against his foreleg, eyelids heavy but smile dawning like sun. Drogon's breaths were ragged yet steady. Rhaegal rose groggily, Viserion struggled but managed to unfurl wings. Men cheered, Night's Watch, Wildlings, Ironborn Turncloaks, Baratheon bannermen, Dornish outriders who had marched 19 days without rest. Even bloodied Freys joined acclamation, dropping swords to kneel. The thunder of unity swallowed valley, traveling like shockwave up ridges into frozen forest, across rivers, into broken towers of Castle Black where ravens cawed exultation. Then, far away beyond Treeline, a deep rumble answered. The wall, what remained, crackled under new strain. Colossal blocks, fissured by prior assault, groaned and split, avalanching along western span. A plume of powder rose sky-high. But the fall was local, the wall overall remained standing, buttressed by bone-deep ice. Jon exhaled. "We live," he said. Stannis joined them, Lightbringer cooling, blade still glowing ember-deep. "Live to mend what the cold could not claim," he corrected. He glanced northward. Dawn's grace, but winter still lingers. "We must fortify, burn every corpse, raise walls of flame," he commanded. "Else some other shade might follow." Robb nodded, but his eyes turned south along King's Road. "And after winter, man's war resumes." "Not today," Jon said. He faced gathered armies, raised Longclaw overhead so it caught newborn sunlight. "Today we bury foe and friend alike. No crowns, no anthems, only pyres to ward the night." His voice soared across stillness. Soldiers bowed heads. Giants bowed. Even Drogon lowered his neck. Daenerys struggled to feet, leaning on Jon's arm. She looked at Robb, at Stannis, at thousands bruised but living. "If this day has proven one truth," she declared softly yet firmly, "it is that the realm survives only when its children stand as one. Let that be our first edict under the dawn." Robb met her gaze, Tully blue to Valyrian violet, and inclined head. Stannis's frown softened as if seeing reason in her words. Around them, men nodded, some wept, some simply stared at sun climbing free of black clouds for first time in what felt like centuries. Jon finally felt warmth on his cheeks, honest warmth, not stolen by frost. He sheathed Longclaw, helped Daenerys as she limped toward the ruin where Maester Wolkan tended wounded. Ghost trotted beside, sniffing dawn air devoid of carrion stench. Overhead, remaining ravens wheeled, cawing triumph. The first pyre burned before noon. They stacked white remains and fallen brothers alike, lighting with wildfire to ensure no corpse ever rose again. Flames towered, black and green and gold all merging, sending columns of smoke that curled into rising thermals and faded into calm sky. Snow began to fall at sunset, but gentle, silent, ordinary snow, not the biting shards of sorcery. It blanketed earth, softening blood-dark ice into strokes of pure white. Night came, a true night unmarred by purple banners overhead, stars sparkling crisp. Campfires dotted valley like constellations fallen to ground. Men sang, quiet at first, then louder, harvest ballads from Reach, lullabies of the Iron Islands, old Rhoynar War dirges. Melisandre knelt in red glow of dying flames, eyelids closed in prayer, her ruby's fire dim to heartbeat's pulse, content. Jon sat beside Daenerys under lean-to of Dragonwing. She rested head on his shoulder. He stroked her silver hair, marveling that such softness could endure. "What now?" she asked, hardly above breath. "Tomorrow," he replied, "we send ravens across kingdoms telling what we faced, what we learned." He smiled faintly. "Then we build something better." Her hand found his scarred fingers interlacing. In that moment Jon felt weight of entire war, of every king's folly and every child's prayer. And he felt hope, not naive, but born of ash and ice alike. The long night had broken. Dawn, however fragile, had arrived. Overhead, the wall loomed scarred yet standing, sentinel against northern waste. It too would need mending. But cracks can be sealed, fissures can be braced. Stone endures. So does the heart of men and women who remember why walls were built in the first place. Who know that kingdoms rise not on crowns, but on courage shared in darkest hour. Snowflakes drifted, landing on Longclaw's pommel where direwolf head glimmered. They melted there, as if blades still held remnant heat of wildfire, of life. Jon watched droplet trickle down and vanish into leather wrap. Above, the moon crested, bathing valley in argent sheen. Somewhere a single horn blew, soft, mournful, but without dread, echoing across newfound peace. The pyres burned for 3 days and nights, feeding on ash that once wore names, pouring column after column of smoke into a sky finally free of sorcery. Wind carried the smell of resin and marrow across the valley, but somehow it did not disgust the living. It grounded them, reminding every soul that breath still rattled their chests only because others no longer could. As flame consumed the last white crystal and blackened bone, dawn of the fourth day unveiled a landscape wholly transformed. Ridges melted to slick glass, the lake fractured into a maze of floating panes, the slopes stippled with green-black puddles where wildfire had cooled. Silence reigned, broken only by creak of leather, sniff of hound, grunt of giant. Jon Snow walked the edge of a melt stream, carving a fresh gully through permafrost. Ghost padded beside him, white fur turned gray by soot yet startling as ever against char and ash. Downslope Manderley carpenters felled spruce trunks for a stockade. Stormlanders stripped wagon axles to fashion makeshift plow sledges. In a holler, giants heaved boulders to create cairns for their fallen. No chants, no laments, just the slow rhythmic thud of stone on stone, an elegy measured by muscle. He paused where a rivulet gurgled from an ice shelf and cupped his gauntlets. The water was frigid enough to burn, pure enough to taste of nothing but mineral. He drank, then splashed cheeks, letting numb cold chase weariness. Sleep had eluded him since the Night King melted. Each time his eyes closed, he felt Obsidian spear tip vibrate against Longclaw's edge, saw white giants toppling, heard Gren's last shout. But duty drove him. Wounded needed quartering, dragonglass caches required guarding, and every corpse, friend or foe, must see flame. Above, the remnant wall glimmered like a blade half-sheathed in snow, severed section yawning toward then country. Stannis's mason swore it could be braced. Jon wasn't sure. Ice that old, threaded with ancient spells, didn't obey chisels and mortars like common stone. Still, they'd try. They had to, because stories whispered across campfires claimed shadows flickered in the far north even now. Whites unbound but still animate, White Walker lieutenants shattered into shards yet clattering onward like mindless beetles. Without the Night King's tether they lacked strategy, but hunger remained. Winter gives no quarter. Footfalls crunched behind. Jon turned to find Robb approaching, hair matted, cheeks raw. He wore no helm, only a circlet of softened iron hammered from the dented band once crowning his brow. In torchlight last night it had looked almost regal. In daylight it appeared a bent horseshoe. "Council's assembling," Robb said. "Stannis grows impatient. When does Stannis not?" Jon wiped ice from beard. "Daenerys. Already there." She arrived with Missandei translating half a dozen languages. Made all the old men nervous. Robb's smile flickered, faded. "How's the leg?" "She won't let Wolken stitch until talks end." "Typical." Robb scratched Ghost's ear. The direwolf pressed into him with grateful growl. "We decide who steers realm, then we let maesters sew us shut. Let's hope we're still alive when they're done arguing." They strode together toward the ruined watchfort now repurposed as council hall. Along the way soldiers dipped heads, watch brothers with black armbands, Karstarks bearing new patches of flaming sword entwined with sunburst, free folk who muttered Lord Crow respectfully. Jon acknowledged each but kept pace. Power had a scent and it hung thick in thawing air. The realm's destiny would pivot in that crumbling tower. He wanted no lords mistaking courtesy for oath. Grey Wind joined them partway, muzzle still stained with blue ichor, impossible to scrub clean. The direwolves flanked the Stark brothers as they entered. Inside, sunlight streamed through a ragged breach. A slab of petrified oak served as table. At its center lay the Nye King's shattered crown, or what remained. A ring of prismatic shards fused by heat, edges dulled where Lightbringer had pierced. Around it stood the claimants. Stannis Baratheon wore his black-red gambeson, Lightbringer sheathed but glowing faintly, as though blade resented scabbard. His jaw might have been chiseled from granite. Beside him Davos bowed greeting, fingers drumming stump habitually. Melisandre stood near a brazier, serenity masking exhaustion. The ruby flickered dimmer than days prior. Across from them Daenerys leaned on an ivory cane carved with dragon spirals. Drogon's scale ringed her throat like gorget. Missandei hovered with parchment quills. Ser Jorah, bandaged, kept watch, but his eyes softened when they found Jon. Old respect bridged narrow channel of suspicion. Bran Stark sat on wicker chair slightly away from table, Mira behind, hotter looming protective. The boy's pupils roamed unfocused, but his head tilted as though hearing voices beyond room's timbers. To Stannis' left, Lady Melissa Florence stood representing Stormlands. To Daenerys', Prince Oberyn's bastard daughters, Sand Snakes, had ridden hard from Salt Shore to offer Dornish neutrality and, privately, fire-forged alliance. On Jon's arrival, murmurs died. Robb cleared throat. Lord Command, he paused, realizing Jon's title might soon shift. Jon, he corrected. We're ready. Jon met each face. Then speak. Stannis spoke first. The wall stands breached. I propose immediate levy of every able-bodied soul from Dread Fort to Old Town. We march north to patch ice, garrison every castle, consecrate Watch's crown force under my banner. The realm cannot linger in anarchy. Daenerys tapped Cain. Every able-bodied soul? And who tilled fields complanting? Or left Westeros half-starved? Dragons cannot feed empty bellies. She gestured to map etched in soot on tabletop. Winter winds still blow, but spring will follow if we nurture soil, not march every farmhand to freeze. Stannis' mouth tightened. If dead regroup, fields won't matter. We crush remainder first. Davos interjected gently. Your Grace, perhaps a balanced levy. Half measure invites second doom, Stannis snapped. Jon raised hand. We'll need garrisons, true, but not armies. Whites without the Night King wander aimless. Pockets of them degrade by day. Scouts report some collapsing into puddles under midday sun. A small force with dragonglass suffices to cull stragglers. Stannis frowned, but Bran spoke, voice dreamlike. The cold still stirs beyond fist of the first men. Seed of frost remains, yet its growth slows. Tend the seed poorly, it blooms again. Tend with care, and tree bears no fruit. Silence followed prophecy. Stannis exhaled steam. Care. A fine word. But steel and fire built walls, not care. Daenerys' gaze sharpened. Walls crumble. Alliances endure. You want watchtowers staffed? Let lords volunteer retinues. Each house pledges annual rotation. 3 moons on, 3 off. Realms beyond narrow see guard step passes thus. My Unsullied will hold Eastwatch, Baratheon men man Shadow Tower, North keeps Castle Black. She swept glance at Jon. Jon considered. We'd need enough dragonglass to supply rotations. Robb produced leather pouch, spilled glossy shards. White Harbor fishermen netted these near Skagos where icebergs calved. Vale miners under Bronze Yone found more beneath shivering sea foothills. Dragonglass no longer rare. Stannis snorted quietly. We melt ice, we find fire. Melisandre's brow creased. Fire buried in ice, yes. Such balance portends new age. Sunlight falls where once only shadow. Jon ignored mysticism. So, rotating garrisons, dragonglass for each post, dragons patrolling overhead. He looked to Daenerys. Can Rhaegal and Viserion fly again soon? With rest, she said. Wings mend slower than hearts. Drogon alone can cover range for now. Then he will. Jon faced Stannis. Will Baratheon banner pledge Shadow Tower 6 months? Stannis' neck stiffened. I pledged life to realm when others knelt to comfort. You dare question? Davos laid hand on his lord's arm. Your Grace, a yes suffices. Stannis grunted. Yes. Jon nodded, scribbled allocation on char map. Next, kingship. Murmur swelled. He raised voice. We cannot afford 5 crowns again. Realm needs governance. Daenerys' amethyst eyes gleamed. Agreed. Let a great council decide lineage. Each region sends electors, lords, maesters, free folk chosen by rooting stakes. Votes cast and open for all to witness. Stannis scoffed. Crowds choose bread, not virtue. They'd raise a jester. And kings raised by right of sword fared better? Daenerys shot back. Aerys burned children alive. Joffrey fed heads to his horse. Let small folk speak, they bear weight of wars we wage. Robb leaned in. Maybe there's middle path. Houses vote, but common folk voice weighed as fifth estate. Stannis' gaze narrowed. And who ensures fairness? Your direwolves counting pebbles. Bran raised palm. I have seen halls beyond seas where stones dropped in bowls speak louder than blades. It can be done if those with swords vow to abide result. Jon breathed deep. I'll abide. He looked to Robb, then Stannis, then Daenerys. Will you? Robb set Grey Wind's paw on table. The North remembers blood cost. If free folk and fisher wives elect pig herder, we bow provided he stands the wall with us. Stannis' eyes burned with pride. Baratheon's established line not by accident. Yet I will submit to counsel if it convenes vantage of gods and men. But know this, I will stand for consideration. Daenerys inclined head. As will I. And I, Rob said softly. Jon felt the room tighten, 3 sovereign hearts beating, each forging destiny. He swallowed. Then call ravens to every holdfast. Set date at Hornwood 2 moons hence, neutral ground, central to realm. Until then we share rule by triune council, Baratheon, Targaryen, Stark. Major edicts require 2 of 3 signatures. Disputes arbitrated by Maester's conclave at Winterfell. Stannis tapped gauntlet on Shard Crown. Triumvirate governance invites stalemate. But temporary, I accept. Daenerys offered half-smile. Temporary until people choose. Missandei recorded. Jon turned to Bran. Any warning we must heed? Bran's pupils dilated, then shrank. Ice sleeps but dreams. In its dream, summer blooms red petals that drip snowmelt. Feed petals warmth. Dream dissolves. Forget, and dreamer wakes. Translation came from Mira. If we prosper, winter's remnant fades. If we neglect justice, war of seasons starts anew. Jon nodded. Then we won't neglect. Council adjourned. Outside, sun rode high, warmth coaxing steam from scorched trenches. Jon emerged with dizziness, so many futures colliding in one room. Gray wind bounded ahead, scattering crows that pecked half-melted armor. Ghost nudged Jon's hand, the wolf sensed fatigue. He found Daenerys seated on flat stone, breathing slow. He knelt. Pain. Only when I move or breathe. She managed weak laugh. Your plan, triune rule, risky. But wise. Voters may crown you, you know. I won't stand. She arched brow. Realm loves you. You saved them. I did my duty. Saving is not ruling. My place is north, mending wall. She studied his face, slight frown. Everyone thinks they know their place until world says otherwise. Wind gusted, ruffling her platinum braid. Jon didn't answer, he feared her right. That evening pyres for giants blazed on ridge. Wildlings sang low dirge, horns echoing. Jon stood with Tormund, who wiped tears unabashed. Big men, he muttered. Bigger hearts. Ground shakes quieter now. Jon clasped his shoulder. They saved us. Aye. Time you South Crows carve giants on your gates so fools remember who bled. Night fell. Camps quieted save blacksmiths forging dragonglass arrowheads under makeshift forges. Jon finally allowed sleep, bedding within Watchfort's chapel. Dreams came. Icy corridors, Ygritte laughing among warm pools, children of forest dancing around dragon eggs. He woke once hearing Bran whisper through stone, "Warg the dawn." Jon drifted again. 10 days later, caravan columns wound south. Wounded on litters, carts carrying charred weapons for smelting, knapsacks stuffed with grim souvenirs. Regal flew overhead, wings mended enough for gliding. Viserion rode thermals behind. Drogon ranged ahead, silhouette eclipsing sun. At last Hearth Crossroads the host parted. Baratheon banners angled southeast to Dreadfort Road, escorting Stannis toward Carhold to muster garrison for Shadow Tower. Dornish and Reach envoys followed Daenerys along King's Road, destined for Winterfell to draft council summons. Wildlings trekked north again, vowing to cleanse haunted forest. Jon oversaw supply inventory at Queen's Crown Holdfast. He scribbled notes, ignoring chatter until Samwell Tarly waddled up. Sam's cheeks glowed with excitement behind spectacles newly acquired from Maester. Cradled in his mittened hands was a bundle. Ravens from Old Town, he chirped. Maester's studied Night King dust. They've confirmed trace of fused ice crystal rarely found except in, well, legend suggests crater east of Ass High where night fell in Age of Heroes. They think Long Night wasn't first. He unwrapped bundle, scroll bearing broken sigil of lost Valyrian house. Archmaester Marwyn sends treatise on forging dragoglass into steel, night glass, swords said to cut moonlight. Jon scanned symbols. You plan to forge? If Citadel endorses, we could equip entire wall with blades never dulling. Sam's eyes shone. But we need dragon fire to temper. Drogon owes me. Jon clapped his back. Write to Gendry at Winterfell's forge, have him draft schema. Sam grinned, scurried away, parchment fluttering. After supplies tallied, Jon rode alone through evening hush. North scent breezes softened, carrying pine resin. For first time in memory, a scent of thaw stirred hope of spring. He halted at bluff overlooking disaster field now half swallowed by tidal snow. Colors of last battle faded, but lumps of hardened lava glass glittered. One lump pulsed faintly, a shard of crown fused with Lightbringer's flame, still warm. John dismounted, approached. When hand neared, shard brightened, faint warmth seeping. He sensed echo of clash between ice and fire, balance made tangible. He slid it into satchel, mind churning. Maybe Maesters could study, maybe Bran could dream deeper. Or maybe he'd keep it as reminder that extremes yield unity. Behind, hoofbeats. Robb rode up, cloak new, stark colors crisp. "Scouts spotted you," he said. "Thought renegade white snatched our Lord Commander." John smirked. "I wander, not run." He eyed brother's circlet replaced by simple leather strap. No crown. Not until votes cast. Robb regarded Valley. "Strange. I thought victory would taste sweeter." John sighed. "Victory tastes of ash. Life's flavor returns later if we plant seeds." Robb nodded slowly. Mother would like hearing that. He dismounted, knelt in snow. "Remember when we raced to top of First Keep, dared each other to jump moat? You broke wrist," John recalled. Robb chuckled. "I'd shatter bones again for such simple days." He stood. "Come." Gendry forged new casts for Dragaglass arrows. "Need your eye." Back at camp, forges hissed, sparks rose like fireflies. Gendry, soot-faced, pumped bellows while Arya, hair shorter, dipped arrowheads in oil. She glanced up, offered ghost smile. "They fly true," she said. John inspected shaft alignment, nodded. "Fast learner." "Teacher helps," she replied, elbowing Gendry, who blushed. Tyrion arrived, limping after ankle sprain, ledger in hand. Dragaglass quotas balanced, which means Lannister can now claim to have mined something valuable besides debt. He noticed shard in Jon's satchel. "What treasure have you plucked?" Jon handed peace. Tyrion's brow lifted. "Ice fused with Lightbringer. Poetic. Might craft crown for whoever wins council, half fire, half frost." He glanced at Robb. "Hard to wear without cutting scalp. Perhaps metaphor." Arya snorted. "Metaphor or not, small folk will want grain before crowns." Tyrion bowed. "I shall remind Lady Sansa when she arrives." He hobbled off. At mention of Sansa, Jon's chest tightened. Letters exchanged claimed she journeyed from the Eyrie, guardians of Vale chosen by new regent Bronze Yohn. She would convene at Winterfell ahead of council. Soon the surviving Starks would share hall again. That night, campfires glowed amber. Jon sat with Tormund, Ygritte absent but memory present, ghosts drift between sparks. Giant's milk rumored in stew kept freezing before ladles rose. Still, laughter warmed. Tormund recounted tale of shadow bear he slew with booger as bait, exaggerated but welcomed. Wildlings and Watch both laughed, boundaries faded. Later, Jon visited infirmary, rows of pallets in half-collapsed stables. Daenerys slept lightly, bandage changed. Missandei read Dree-fold tales to children orphaned by winter. Drogon dozed outside, tail rhythmically tapping. Jon whispered thanks to Queen. She murmured something about dawn and dire wolves. 5 weeks passed. Roads thawed, streams gushed. Columns moved south. Carhold garrison took over Shadow Tower. Stormlanders replaced them first rotation. Unsullied under Grey Worm rebuilt Eastwatch piers. Dothraki herds roamed gift plains, planting grass seed in churned soils. Emissaries from free cities arrived laden with grain and spices, hoping to trade peace for debt waivers. At Winterfell, snows melted fast under dragonfire carefully applied to ramparts. The castle bustled. Smiths reforging gate chains, masons chiseling new dire wolves on battlements, maesters cataloging refugees. Bran directed repairs from Godwood, commuting with Weirwoods to track white pockets. Arya drilled archers. Sansa oversaw storehouses, redistributing grain. Whispers called her Queen of Needles and Bread. When Jon entered Winterfell's yard after weeks on wall, tears filled eyes. Familiar scents, baked oats, forged soot, pine pitch mingled with new, dragon musk, Dornish citrus. The castle felt both ancient and newborn. He dismounted, Sansa crossed yard, blue cloak flowing, they embraced fiercely. Not since childhood had such hug broken his composure. Ghost and Lady, grown from pups saved by Vale maesters, sniffed each other warily then settled near kennel. Snowflakes drifted though sky clear, as if Winterfell conjured its own gentle storm always. Preparations for council consumed days. Great hall adorned with banners of 7 regions plus new sigils. Flaming heart of RH lore, dire wolf wrapped around dragon. Long trestles awaited electors, 3 from each great house, 2 from free folk, 1 each representing maesters, faith, small folk. Quills of raven feather dyed in region colors set beside clay tokens to be cast into lead urns shaped as runes of unity. Night before council, Jon walked ramparts with Tyrion. People will argue, Dwarf said. Some fear peasant votes sway too heavy, others fear lords cheat. I fear boredom, debate without wine is betrayal. Jon chuckled. I'll send Cask. Tyrion grew serious. If they choose Stannis, realm gains stern hand but loses warmth. If Daenerys, dragons ensure peace, yet nobles may rebel at foreign queen. If Robb, Southron vassals resent northern dominance. You bow out yet your name atop wagers in Flea Bottom. Why? I belong to Watch. Watch under Triune Charter, nothing binds you after council. Jon exhaled cloud. Leadership not my desire. Leadership rarely desired by those fit to wield it, Tyrion sighed. But world seldom heeds desire. Still, may the best fool win. Council day dawned crisp. Snowflake petals drifted from old weirwood, crimson against blue sky. Electors filed into hall, rustling like tide. Voices bounced off rafters. Jon sat with Maester's section, impartial by vow though eyes of throng often darted his way. Voting lasted hours, speeches, retorts, barbs. Davos spoke of duty, Missandei of compassion, Sansa of stability, Bronze Yone of oaths. Smallfolk spokeswoman Old Nan's granddaughter recounted hunger under Lannisters, ended with plea for bread before banners. The free folk rider Harma the Dog's Head declared no king north of Wall but conceded realms saved by Union, so Union they'd honor. Tokens clinked into urns, stags, wolves, dragons, even lion coin cast symbolic. First tally tied, Stannis 11, Daenerys 11, Robb 10, Jon 4, someone wrote his name across clay though tokens blank. Second round after horse trading, Robb gained, Stannis lost. Third, Jon's count surged, Karstark commoner changed heart sighting, Crow saved my babe with his blade. Tension tightened. On fourth ballot, tie between Jon and Daenerys, Stannis trailing, Robb in middle. Stannis rose, armor creaking. Realm cannot fracture again, he declared, surprising many. I withdraw. Pledge support to Snow, trueborn of both ice and fire. Shock rippled. Robb stood. North loves me, but realm needs bridge. I withdraw, pledge to Jon. Now Daenerys faced Jon, dragons versus direwolf. She regarded Hall, sensed potent shift. Slowly she limped to podium. I crossed sea to break wheel of tyranny, she spoke, voice fragile yet firm. Will shattered. Realm chooses. If I claim crown, I wield dragons that might frighten south to compliance. Yet New World must be led by man born of realm's pain and promise. I withdraw. Jon Snow shall be king if he accepts. Silence thundered. Jon's heart pounded like Smith's hammer. He stood trembling. I never saw crown. Voices muttered, agreeing, admonishing. He raised hands. But if realm asks, I serve. On one condition, no more single throne. Henceforth Council of Realms rules with monarch as steward rotating each decade. Crown becomes burden shared, not toy fought for. He looked at Stannis, Daenerys, Robb. Will you pledge to council charter? They nodded, one by one. Applause erupted, relief, hope, bewilderment. Tokens recast final time, Jon's urn overflowed. Maester Wolkan proclaimed, by will of realms united, Jon Targaryen Stark, born of ice and fire, becomes first steward king of Westeros. Jon knelt, Bran rolled forward, placed weirwood circlet carved by children of forest upon his brow. Light from window lit with grain, red sap appearing like inlaid rubies. Jon rose. Hall roared. Yet he felt weight heavier than any blade. That evening feast filled great hall, venison stew, arbor gold, Dornish peppers charred by dragon breath. Giants tapped barrels of mead. Sansa orchestrated seating to mingle foes, petty insults mellowed under wine. Jon slipped onto balcony, crown in hand, gaze on stars. Daenerys joined, leg better, silver hair gleaming. Your crown suits, she said. Feels foreign. Foreign things become familiar. She smiled. Steward King, clever title. Means you can abdicate after service. You'd rule better. Jon looked at her. But realm feared new conquest. They fear dragons, she corrected. Dragons will protect Wall now, perhaps hearts soften. Jon studied constellations. I'll need counsel. You have mine. She touched crown, then his cheek. Warmth sparked. Below, Ghost and Drogon sniffed near each other, uneasy peace. Spring blossomed over moons. Fields tilled, grain sprouted. Stormlands built lighthouse beacons along coasts. Dothraki taught reach farmers new irrigation by hoof churning. Gendry's Night Glass Forge at Dragonstone produced first blade, Stormbreak. Presented to Sam for forging design. Sam squealed like child. At Wall, rotating garrisons worked. Unsullied and free folk shared watch. Baratheon engineers erected steel bracing. Children of Forest arrived to weave spells into cracks. Rhaegal perched at Nightfort, Viserion at Eastwatch, Drogon roamed skies. Jon traveled realm, mediated water dispute in Dorne, pardoned Lannister cousins for war crimes, ordered Corvid census in Vale. He wore crown rarely, preferred wolfhead brooch. People called him King Crow or Winterfire. Robb commanded northern levy against raiders from Skagos who worshipped ice shards. Victory earned unity. Stannis trained cadets at Storm's End, teaching math of siege not glory. Daenerys established Dragon Academy at Old Town for maesters to study draconic lore. Their Drogon allowed scale scrapings under strict watch. One night months later, Bran summoned Jon to Godwood. Trees whispered louder than wind. Bran spoke, dreamer stirs. Not frost, but shadow of man's greed. When kings forget counsel, night returns. Jon understood, vigilance eternal. Years passed, council rotated. Sansa served as first elected chancellor, Gendry master of forges. Tyrion high scribe, Arya vanished west seeking world's edge. Bran remained watching roots. Jon aged with silver at temples. Peace lasted longest in memory. Wild roses climbed repaired walls, weaving petals through cracks where once ice invaded. At dusk, Jon strolled parapet with Daenerys, her limp nearly gone, watching children of diverse houses chase each other, wooden swords clacking. He spoke softly, "Do you ever miss war?" She laughed. "I miss purpose. But planting orchards for orphans fills void." Thunder rolled distant, summer storm. Jon inhaled petrichor. No chill of ancient winter. Just life. He rested crown of living wood on crenel, saplings sprouted from circlet roots into mortar. "Let throne remain soil," he said. "We reign in deeds, not seats." And as reign began, Jon and Daenerys raised hoods and descended to courtyard where seedlings waited for water, and behind them the wall stood repaired, dragons circled idle skies, and the dream of winter slept peaceful under watch of hearts still burning. The moon hung low over Winterfell, a pale silver coin sliding beneath a muffling quilt of cloud. Snowflakes the size of fingernails spiraled from a wind that carried neither malice nor sorrow, only the quiet hush of lingering winter. Yet below in the vaulted crypt gallery, Jon Snow felt something stir that was neither wind nor memory. He walked alone, torch guttering. The passage smelled of damp earth and stone older than names. Each carved stark effigy loomed with silent reproach, stone wolves crouched at their feet like half-remembered guardians. Jon paused before his father's likeness, head bowed, palm resting on long-rusted greatsword. The torch sputtered, shadows crawled over Ned Stark's face until it looked almost alive. For a moment Jon fancied that the stone eyes flicked toward him, that his father might speak of burdens shared, of crowns made to be set down. But the crypt remained mute. Only faint scratching broke the silence. A whisper at the edge of hearing, as though claws scrabbled on slate far deeper below. Jon's brows furrowed. He turned slowly, lifting the torch. No rat stirred, no draft whistled. Yet the sound persisted. A soft rasping, rhythmic, like someone scoring ice with blunt knife. He stepped forward 3 paces. The scratching grew louder. Another 5, and it became a scraping shuffle, muffled but insistent. Jon's hand slid to the dagger at his belt. Dragonglass glittered black-orange in firelight. He followed the noise down the central aisle until he reached a niche where no effigy lay, only blank stone. The scratching stopped. Silence closed around him, thick as North Sea fog. Torchlight flickered. A hairline crack split the floor at Jon's feet, thin as spider silk, leaking a thread of chilled air. He knelt, touched the seam. Frost rimed his fingertips. He narrowed his eyes, pressed ear to stone. For 3 heartbeats he heard nothing. Then a sharp, soft note. A thump, distant, as though something heavy struck hollow cavern far below. He straightened, breath ghosting the torch. Somewhere above, bells tolled midnight. Jon lingered one moment more. The seam sat still, inert, perhaps ground settling after thaw, perhaps echo from smithy above. And yet, he returned to Great Hall uneasy. In council chamber at dawn, Bran waited beneath tangle of raven feathers mounted to curved branch, white hair drifting like snowfall. Mira stood close, staff slanted across back. John set torch in sconce, recounted what he had heard. Bran listened, lids half closed. When John finished, Bran murmured, "The bones remember more than the living. Something wakes beneath the crypts." John frowned. "A thing we should fear? Not yet." Bran's gaze drifted into distance beyond walls or years. A dream only, stirring in its sleep. But dreams can kill if left untended. "I'll send masons to seal the seam," John decided. "The seam is only doorway," Bran whispered. "Better to ask who knocks." John stiffened. "Who?" Bran's eyes clouded white. Pupils vanished. A raven perched above rasped 3 notes. Bran inhaled. Colors swirled back into his gaze. An echo of people older than Winterfell. Bones without voice seeking tongue. When time is right, they will speak. John rubbed temples. "We have fields to plant, levees to rotate, canal projects at Maidenpool. We can't chase echoes under rock." "Echoes can become avalanches," Bran replied, then wheeled chair toward window. By summer's height, green swallowed north in riot of foxglove and sweetgrass. The gift bloomed under Dothraki irrigation. Fenced paddocks where Garrens grazed, barley fields rippling like Golden Cape. Free folk villages sprouted longhouses near each watch castle, exchanging cured elk hides for grain and copper plowshares. The wall itself gleamed after months of infusions. Iron braces anchored by fused night glass rods, their veins glowing faint rose at dusk. Dragon fire caught forever in obsidian marrow. Yet far to the east, beyond shivering sea, an iceberg the size of Pike calved from an unnamed glacier, cracking open like giant egg. From its core poured a fog denser than night, spreading in tendrils across bright water. Whalers out of Hardhome saw shapes swimming in that fog. Skeletal rays, translucent wolves. The men rowed hard south, but only one vessel limped into Skagos port, crew half-mad, tongues frost-burned black. They babbled of voices humming beneath waves, calling them north to a bright blue star. Maesters at Old Town recorded the tale, sealed scroll with wax of skepticism. But Archmaester Marwyn frowned, fingers tapping quill. He sent Raven to Jon Snow, wings beating 2,000 leagues over restless tides. In Dragonstone's Forge Grotto, Gendry hammered night glass billet on anvil ringed with glyphs etched by children of forest. Sparks danced turquoise. Beside him stood Sam, reciting temperature intervals, quench at 600. Reheat to 800 slowly, or matrix fractures. Grey Worm oversaw, spear but thudding absent beat. The billet glowed violet, nearly white. Gendry drew it out, plunged into barrel of rendered dragon fat. Steam roared. When smoke cleared, he lifted sword blank shimmering indigo, stars swirling in grain like captured sky. Sam grinned. "Call it Starfall," Gendry said. Grey Worm inclined head. "Gift to Goddess of Justice." "Or to Queen of Dragons," Sam mused. "Or to Night's Watch," Grey Worm retorted. "Steel belongs to Realm." They argued amicably, not seeing thin hairline crack spider across barrel rim, dragon fat cooling too quick. Quench water steamed onto floor, hissed. Gendry cursed, stomped leak. No harm done, yet hairline cracks echoed those in Winterfell crypt. 2 months before harvest, Jon rode south along King's Road disguised as simple forester named Jack Clay. He traveled with only Ghost and one guard, Ser Talia Sand, bastard of Dorne known for spearplay and sharper wit. Jon sought rumors, bandit raids in Crownlands, whispers of Lannister remnant mustering, talk of faith militant restored. At near Sow's Horn, minstrel sang ballad of Dawnfang, a sword forged from Starfallen on neck, wielded by King of Wolves and Dragons. Crowd cheered. Jon frowned, secrets traveled quick. Next village he overheard farmers whisper that Night King's crown pieces fetched silver in Essosi bazaars, and scrupulous traders bribed hunters to pick battle site ruins. Dragonglass shards sold as love charms. Jon resolved to tighten watch. But largest rumor came from river bargemen at Stonehenge, talk of sickness in Gulltown. "Men freeze inside own skin," bargemen said. "Cold of moon," Maester calls it. "Blisters like ice pearls. When they cough, breath turns blue." Another muttered that bodies wouldn't rot, just sat like wax dolls. Jon's gut clenched. He and Talia bought fresh horses, sped east toward the Vale. At Gullown Gate they found chaos. Bronzegate men barred entry, faces hidden by scarves soaked in vinegar. Smell of sickness drifted, sweet, metallic. Bodies loaded on ox carts creaked downhill toward shallow pits. Infirmaries overflowed. Maester Coleman greeted John with hollow eyes. It came 3 weeks past, Coleman rasped. Sailors from Tyrosh brought a cask of ice wine. First they perished, then dockhands, then half the lower quarter. He guided John to Plague Ward. Victims lay swaddled, skin marbled blue-white, frost rime at nostrils though midsummer sun beat outside. Coleman sighed. Fire delays spread, torches near beds warm lungs enough to keep them alive. But stoke too hot and they burn. Balance then. John lifted sheet of one patient. A boy of 10, pupils ice blue. The boy's eyes darted behind lids as if dreaming. John whispered question. The boy's lips parted, vapor curled from mouth. Hear the song beneath the ice, boy murmured. We are cold, but the light is colder. Coleman crossed self. They speak in sleep all same phrase. John's blood chilled. He dispatched Raven to Winterfell, quarantine Gulltown, send dragaglass shipments for pyres, forbid export of harbor ice. But whispers had flown already. Merchant ships fled days earlier, some bound for White Harbor. Frost plague seeds scattered on each tide. At Winterfell, Sansa convened healers. Sam traveled by Ravenback to teach protocols. Fires built under stone floors, herbal fumigations burned. Nightglass tongs placed in hearth ready to cauterize. Bran predicted plague's vector, waterways feed roots fastest. Letters sent to river lords, boil water, keep braziers at docks. Meanwhile in crypt, scene widened. Mason picks rang. Sparks flew, but new fissures appeared each fortnight, self-splitting. Bran descended with Mira and Hodder. They placed Hearttree branch across crack, sap dripped, hissing, sealing gap with living amber. For a time scratching ceased. South of Red Mountains, Daenerys inspected aqueduct project built by Dornish engineers and unsullied labor. She surveyed saltmarsh, cane fields. But midday heat dimmed Drogon, dragon's scales dulled, breath labored. Maester Kedry examined, small patches of frost along inner wing veins. How? Jon asked via mirror message days later. Dornish heat, Daenerys replied, bewildered. Yet frost. Jon's heart hammered. He told her a frost plague. She ordered every dragon examined. Regal healthy, Viserion developed minor lesions. Archmaester Marwyn traveled from Old Town with starglass lens. Under lens, dragon lesions revealed crystals identical to Night King crown fragments. Contamination likely from scavenged shards smuggled south as trinkets. Council decreed immediate recall of all shards, possession punishable by exile. But black markets thrived, coin loves forbidden. Autumn's cusp. Harvest good but plague worse. Frostchill spread along coastlines despite heat. Victims did not die but slipped into torpor, bodies cold yet hearts faintly beating. A scholar compared them to seeds awaiting thaw. Jon summoned meeting at Harrenhal Central, vast halls to distance sick. Stark, Targaryen, Baratheon present. Maesters argued plague not viral but mineral, crystal poisoning blood, seeding veins with lattice that stymied warmth. Only dragonfire strong enough to vaporize shards within living host, but dragonfire kills host. A gentler heat needed. Melisandre suggested fires of Lawler tempered with weirwood ash might purge. Plans drafted, construct ritual chambers, kills, in every large town, heat to threshold just below flesh charring, treat patients incrementally. Risk high, but without cure plague would freeze realm gradually. Robb volunteered to test procedure. Minor lesion on his forearm from handshake with plagued envoy. Chamber built in Harrenhal's forge. Gendry and Melisandre calibrated charcoal mix and weirwood powder. Jon stood watch as Robb entered kiln wearing only leather mask soaked in vinegar. Heat rose. Flames licked iron slats. Robb grit teeth, sweat beading, lesion sizzling. After minute lesion cracked, crystallized core oozed liquid water. Melisandre chanted low. Bran warged ravens overhead. Energies crossed unseen field. Robb stumbled out faint. Skin reddened but alive. Lesion gone. Larson's sword. Treatment rolled across realm. Many survived. Some perished. But plague curve bent downward. Still, seam reopened. Scratching resumed louder. Bran dreamt stone kings rising beneath Winterfell with mouths of crystal singing cold lullaby. Jon ordered deeper excavation. Miners uncovered cavern of opaline pillars. At center lay black pool simmering with pale light. From depths rose column of icy vapor carrying faint hum of many voices. Sam hypothesized, site where magic of long night first touched ground, veins of unknown mineral, moon crystal. When Night King died, resonance fractured, now leaking. Jon realized shards scavenged from battlefield resonated across ley lines back to Pool, generating plague. Destroy Pool, break Link. But destroying could shatter foundations of Winterfell. And Pool might anchor magic that kept Wall's ancient wards alive. Dilemma. Council argued day and night. Stannis favored ceiling cavern with night glass concrete. Daenerys feared aftershock harming dragons. Bran said Pool must sing out its song and fade, interference could awaken worse. During dead of night, Jon crept to crypt with torch and drag-a-glass axe. He descended fissure path miners carved. Ghost followed. Air grew frigid. Pool shimmered, humming like lullaby of whales. Jon stepped to edge. Crystal's ringed basin, facets reflecting torchlight into galaxies. At water's lip a figure stood, no flesh, but outline of icy woman, tall, clothed in frost mantle. Her face serene, eyes empty void. She raised hand. Scratching stopped. Voice soft, layered like choir of wind bells, spoke into Jon's mind. We are seed of first winter. Night King was fruit, but root remains. You slay fruit, root slumbers. Let root sleep, sun rises. Strike root, storm returns. Jon swallowed. Your root spawns sickness. Balance seeks form, choir answered. Shard stirred root, shard hunger draws heat. Remove shard hunger, root dreams calm. Shard's gone soon. But we cannot risk realm. Trust sun heart, voice whispered. Fire of love warms deepest cold. Keep Pool beneath hearth of family, songs entwine. The vision dissolved, Pool fell silent, ice mist lowering like curtain. Jon exhaled, heart thundering. He returned to council, relayed encounter. Skepticism reigned, but Bran nodded slowly. Old powers speak in symbols. Winterfell is hearth built atop well of cold. Our duty not to bury or destroy, but to watch, to harmonize. Thus plan shifted. Build great kiln hearth above Pool, undercroft forge fed by dragon fire moderated through weirwood charcoal, channeling excess warmth into Pool to balance. Starfall sword blank to be tempered here, forging unity of ice and fire. Winterfell masons cut flues, copper vents. Gendry and Mira oversaw flows. Drogon lay across courtyard grate, exhaling measured gusts keyed by Bran's raven signals. Over weeks the hum softened, seam closed, frost plague abated fully. Finally harvest festival dawned clear. Fields of barley bowed golden, orchards sagged with red apple. People from all realms converged for feast of reunion. Giants danced with Tyrell minstrels, free folk wrestled Dornish in friendly bouts, dragons circled over fireworks of wildfire sheep. In Godwood at dusk, Jon knelt before Hearttree, starfall across thighs, blade shimmering cosmos. Daenerys knelt opposite with new hatchling. Tiny ruby dragon perched on gloved hand. Bran, voice resonant, declared covenant. Fire and ice share root. Song of winter rests beneath hearth. Let no realm forget flame warms, cold preserves. Together they keep world turning. Jon rose, raised starfall skyward. Aurora flickered faint but gentle. Crowd cheered. That night under lanterns, Jon and Daenerys walked ramparts. She leaned on his arm lightly. Her leg healed, though winter aches lingered. Below, music drifted, lyres and drums thumping in joyous cacophony. Jon said, Pool sleeps. For now, she agreed. Dreams may stir again centuries hence. Then future stewards will stand watch. He smiled wryly. So long as they remember to share crown. She chuckled. Crown has grown roots into parapet. Hard to pry free now. Jon gazed at wooden circlet embedded in stone. Leaves sprouting each spring. Good. Ruling from living things suits realm better than iron chairs. She faced him, eyes shimmering violet under torchlight. Will king ever rest? Leave watch to another? When council turns, I return north true, ride with ghost. But not yet. Planting still needs done. Children of long night to raise into warm days. She touched his cheek. We'll raise them together. They kissed beneath pale shimmer of dawn-kissed stars. Above, Drogon rumbled contentment. In crypt below, seemed sealed tight, Pool glowed steady beneath new furnace. Singing rhythmic lullaby matched to heartbeat of castle. Root of winter dreamed peaceful dreams, cradled by warmth of those sworn to guard both fire and ice. And as year turned, ravens flew far beyond wall carrying word. Realm healed, peace stood, but watch endured. For in north, they say, winter always whispers. Yet as long as hearths burn and hearts hold memory of unity, the whisper remains a lullaby, not a dirge. So the story goes, sung in mead halls and market squares, of the night the White Walkers fell, and of the Steward King who chose to share his crown with all. Of dragons that warmed frost-plagued blood and giants who built cairns taller than towers. Of a song beneath ice and a hearth above it, two halves of the same miracle. And of dawn that finally, fully broke, scattering cold shadows across a realm ready to begin anew.